Normal day? Think again. The weirdest plot twists people swear they've witnessed. I'm a radiologist. One day reporting, I pull up a CT of a 30-something-year-old who had abdominal pain. Specifically, they said they felt tension and then a distinct popping sensation with a sharp pain, and then a vague but moderately severe ache that persisted. So, I'm looking for the usual suspects in this sort of presentation. Appendicitis, diverticulitis, maybe epiploic appendicitis, or inflammatory bowel disease. Found a foreign body in the small bowel. It looked odd on single slices, so I reformatted the image set in 3D. Found a bread bag clip. You know those little particular pieces of plastic to keep the bags closed. Interestingly, I found another one about 6 years later. My 2 cases constitute about 5% of all cases ever reported worldwide. On vacation in London, my wife and I were waiting for a train in a tube station. 2 trains arrived in the station before ours showed up. As a native New Yorker, I was comforted to see that pigeons live in subway stations everywhere. The first train pulls into the station and the doors open. As people enter and exit the train, one pigeon flutters down from the ceiling, lands on the platform and calmly walks onto the train like he's off to work or something. My wife and I laugh about this a little as the doors close and the train pulls away from the station. The second train pulls into the station, the doors open and people shuffle out. After a moment, a different pigeon walks out of this train and then flutters up to the spot vacated by the first one. Anyway, seems like London pigeons have the tube pretty much figured out. I saw a London pigeon wait for the pedestrian crossing to turn green and then cross the road. Waited on the curb. As soon as the little man went green, off he trotted to the other side. Very good road sense, those birds. Worked as a waiter, and after we finished one night, a drunk man was walking down the street. One of my co-workers recognized him and asked if he was the German opera singer doing a show in the city. He answered, "Ja," and asked if we'd like to hear him sing. So he gave us a 3-minute private concert in the middle of the night, drunk off his face. I helped a German guy at CVS jump his car, and to thank me, he gave me a fancy bottle of shampoo. Well, we have 2 German stories, one of a free masterclass performance by an esteemed professional, and one who took up a significant portion of your time and gave you a bottle of shampoo. That country contains multitudes, clearly. While jogging slowly up a steep hill, I got cheered on by the driver of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. Did he say, "You're not a loser, you're a wiener"? A huge, big ceramic tub flew off a flatbed truck and exploded into a million pieces on the interstate. I'd just pulled out of my office parking lot when a lady hit my rear passenger side with her SUV as she pulled out of a rail station parking lot. Ugh. So we both pulled over at the Taco Cabana to do the typical fender-bender rigmarole, but to my surprise, a pickup truck followed behind us. I didn't think too much of it and I got out to exchange info. As I approached her car, I noticed she's avoiding my gaze completely. I'm standing there knocking on her window like, "What the frick, lady?" And then a man gets out of the aforementioned truck. He demands to know what happened and why I hit her, to which I retort, "Excuse me, but who are you?" And she hit me. Are you frickin' joking? Are you blind? I'm growing more livid by the second because I just want to go home. Out of nowhere, her van with a local Mexican restaurant's branding pulls up and another guy gets out and starts yelling at pickup truck man. They seem to know each other. The woman in the SUV now locks her door. I heard her power locks. And I turn back to address the van man and he's arguing with pickup truck man. A security guard from the neighboring rail station is walking over, and as I'm flagging him over for help, van man headbutts pickup truck man. Full on. I'm in total disbelief and now the security guard is frantically running and jumping a hedge of bushes. He comes and breaks up the fight. I'm not sure why, but it was only at this point that I feared for my safety. But I was also now deeply invested in this drama that was unfolding. Turns out the woman who hit me was having an affair with the pickup truck man and they were having a rendezvous at the rail station parking lot. Van man is her husband and he had just caught them in the act. Worst part is their teenage son was with him. Van man is practically giddily telling me to contact him at all if I need a witness to the accident to get my car fixed. Presumably so she can get slammed with a hefty fine or a premium or whatever. So yeah, you just don't see a grown man headbutt another grown man in a Taco Cabana parking lot every day. A bride in her wedding gown running in the train station being chased by 2 women holding the train of her dress. I was driving home one day and as I entered my neighborhood, I saw a turkey in mid-flight about 15 feet in the air glide across the road and face first into the side of a house. It plopped down on the ground and just as quickly hightailed it around the corner and out of sight. An ambulance ran over a pedestrian while on the way back to a medical emergency, so they picked up the pedestrian that they'd just run over and came back to the hospital. Fortunately, both emergencies turned out okay. I once saw a squirrel carrying an entire pomegranate around a cemetery. I saw a dude absolutely bombing a hill on a skateboard, doobie in hand, a crossbow on his back. Not like a little one, like a medieval reenactment crossbow used for storming the gates of Helm's Deep. I once took the Channel from London to Paris, first time ever doing so, or even being in France for that matter. As I was walking through the station, a dude ran up to me and started quacking like a duck. I still wonder how that guy's doing 2 years later. Watched a guy on a quad drop his hat, look back and decide to leave it behind. About 2 minutes later, some guy in a tan car drives up, swerves around it, stops, leans out of the car, picks up the hat, puts it on, and then just drives away like nothing happened. Neutering a dog the other day, he appeared to be a cryptochid, that is, one normal testy, one not descended, retained somewhere in the abdomen. Well, we can still neuter those. In fact, it's even more important to do so, since the retained one can later develop cancer if left behind. So into the abdomen I went, looking for that retained testy, which I was expecting to find somewhere between the kidney and the inguinal ring. I found a uterus instead. It was like looking both ways before crossing the street and then getting hit by a submarine from the sky. At around 3 a.m., I saw a man rollerblading through the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton. I couldn't believe the hotel staff were just letting him get away with this, but no one even attempted to stop him. I ended up getting on the elevator behind him. That man was Jim Carrey. I was walking through my neighborhood with a couple of friends one morning, and a couple of women drove up to us and asked if we'd seen their horse. We were confused and told them no sorry, and they drove away, but literally 30 seconds later a horse runs out of the woods about 10 feet in front of us and runs past us down the street. We were all awestruck. Preface, I live in the Crystal Valley of the Midwest, so this story isn't exactly surprising. I was in Walmart and I saw this older woman, about 65, and she didn't have a shirt or a brassiere on. Instead, she took her very stretchy pants and lifted them up above her very saggy chest, forming a sort of romper jumper thing, and just went on her way. That was not something I expected or wanted to see. My friends and I have a theory that every Walmart in the US has the same people in it. No matter where you are, once you step inside, you're no longer in the same town you were just in. You are now in Walmart. I used to work next door to a mini golf course, and the window of our drive-thru looked out over the golf course. One day I'm working the drive-thru and I look out the window to see 4 people golfing in full fursuits. When I was working nights on security, I saw 2 people getting chased by a rat. I questioned life for a brief moment. Was that the moment you chose to stop taking whatever substances I assume you were downing by the sachet every shift? Honestly, I love this. It reminds me of that Disney trope where like a homeless guy is drinking liquor and then he throws away the bottle they were just drinking because what they've just seen in front of their eyes was so surreal. I worked at a high-functioning casino as a cocktail server a few years back. This lady came up to me and asked if I wanted to see something cool. Me, not knowing what to expect, says, "Sure, why not?" The woman proceeds to pull a purple rag out of her brassiere and begins to unfold it. I start to hear little chirps coming out from the rag. This woman pulled a baby chicken out of her cleave in the middle of a casino and let me pet it. She then folded the rag back up, stuffed the baby chicken back into her chest and told me not to tell anyone. You better believe I told everyone. Today I was coming upstairs after eating quesadillas with my family and watching Frasier, and my 90-pound dog suddenly scrambles up the last 3 steps. I saw a flash of fur and I'm like, what the frick? A rabbit in my house? I see there's a strange small dog in my place, and then there's yelping, and then there's another small dog. My big puppy chases the crap out of them in the living room as they dash for the door, yelping with my dog tailing them down the frickin' block. Yeah, turns out as I was cooking the quesadillas, I opened the back door a little bit to let my dog out to pee, and forgot the door was open. So these 2 little scoundrels must have been like, "Hey, it smells good in this house, let's go inside." A coyote puppy came out of the arroyo and followed me and my dog around while we were walking. They didn't become friends or have any wondrous adventures or anything. My friend and I were on the loop around Atlanta in bumper-to-bumper traffic. There was a Dodge dually pulling a flatbed trailer in the lane next to us, and on the other side of him was an S10 Blazer who apparently wanted to get in behind the truck. As soon as the truck was past the Blazer, he started to change lanes. but when he noticed the trailer, he swerved back into his own lane, but he overcorrected. Then he got that blazer up on two wheels like in a stunt show. I could see the drive shaft spinning. He held it long enough for me to turn to my wife, tap her on the arm and say, "Look at that." She saw it, he set it back down, and just kept driving. I was like, are we in a movie? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Blind dude walking into an ambulance face first. The blind dude was crossing the street. He was hearing impaired as well. Striped cane, you see. The ambulance was stopped halfway through a left turn, blocking the pedestrian path. Blind and deaf dude's cane went right under the ambulance, and he went wham, face first. It was audible. The guy in the ambulance's passenger seat watched the whole thing happen. His face contorted from disbelief to shock, fear, horror, a bit of laughter, concern, and finally relief. Guy was around 30 years old and tall. 6 foot 5 inches tall, like a monster. He had a beautiful McEnroe Garfunkel hair puff. Fun times. Dream Theater opened. In the parking lot of a concert in the 80s, a guy with a big blonde fro stripped down and stimulated adult relations with the windshield of his Chevelle. Then he dismounted and strutted around like a chicken. Then more windshield fun times, then chicken, windshield, chicken, ambulance. Either he has stuff in his system that shouldn't be there, or he's missing stuff that should. Looking out my third-story dorm room window and watching the contents of the 4th floor lounge fly past. I'm afraid that depending on the college or university, that might be a daily occurrence in some dorms. This reminds me of an old story from my college where a student threw a burning mattress out his dorm window. When campus security found him, they asked him why he threw a burning mattress out the window, to which he responded, "Because it was on fire!" When we saw a pickup truck pull a boat down a city street. Without a trailer. Lots of sparks, though. I still wonder about that. I just shared the longer version of this story earlier today, but to summarize, a person getting arrested while wearing an inmate costume. Our tiny kitten had stolen a slice of pepperoni pizza and was hissing and snarling and fighting off 2 adult dogs and an adult cat. Nobody was getting that slice of pizza from him. Some guy cut me off with a trailer on a road with a speed limit of 35. A few minutes later, I happened to pull into the same gas station as him. I tried my best not to look at him. I don't want to start anything. I hear, "Hey!" I make a beeline for the gas station door. Then I hear a whistle coming from the direction where he was, and I was still trying to ignore him. I finally turn around when he comes jogging up to me. Rough-looking fella. But he says, "I'm sorry for cutting you off back there. I was low on gas." I drive for a living and I come across buttholes daily, so this guy apologizing really threw me off. I said, "No worries," and I thanked him for apologizing and we went our separate way. In short, butthole driver cuts me off and then apologizes to me in public. Trail riding up in a fairly isolated part of north-central Washington state when 3 emus ran out of the trees. The horses were not impressed. These birds lived up there for several years, menacing anyone who came around. Saw a roadrunner and a coyote along the same stretch of highway. Saw a car that instead of paint was covered in short brown fur. Never seen anything like it since. This was probably somebody else's unexpected weird plot twist, but this one was the hottest recorded day in the city. I was walking down a secluded trail, but had to stop at a bench just to cool down. Then this really tall black guy was sitting in a motorized chair with a foot cast. He was really chilled since he was smoking a J and asked if I wanted a lift. So I sat on one of the armrests and away we went. It was a short ride, but he offered me a hit of his doobie and I figured, crap, why not? This is already the most bizarre situation I've ever been in. We passed an old lady and then it hit me like, oh, you know, we're in the most affluent part of a city and a black guy and a brown guy are cruising through the scenic path, smoking a J on a motorized chair. Just your average day in the city. A woman at the 7-Eleven was trying to put hot water on a cup of instant ramen, accidentally put in hot coffee. That just sounds completely normal to the narrator, to be honest. I am certain that there's a 50% chance of me pouring the wrong liquid into the wrong receptacle if I have more than 2 liquids at hand at any given time. For reference, see me drinking my paint water from my brush cleaning cup instead of my tea at any given time that I paint. Found out today that my grandpa was a boy when the historic tornado of 1939 hit Anoka, Minnesota. He was trying to find his brother and was pulled into the armory by a stranger and taken into the basement moments before the roof was blown off. Found his brother in the basement and was instructed by brother to go straight home. On the way home, he came across a woman who had been beheaded from the tornado. He then saw a man on the ground who had been clutching something. He was too scared to see if he was alive and just ran home. His other brother was in a movie theater and it somehow didn't lose power or anything during the tornado. The movie just kept playing, so the older brother left the movie theater clueless to the tornado to see basically the entire town destroyed. I walked into my backyard and I found a chicken. The strange part was that my backyard was completely fenced off with no gaps that a chicken could have snuck through. So where did this chicken come from and how did it get into my backyard? Well, I got the latter answer when I spooked it. It ran towards the chain-link fence at the rear of the yard, grabbed a link with its beak and proceeded to pull itself up. It locked in first one foot, then the other, then raised its beak to repeat the process until it had scaled the fence completely and hopped down, wings blasting to slow its descent. That thing was a fast climber. The squirrels should have taken notes. As for the former answer, it turns out my neighbor was raising chickens and this one ran away when coyotes raided her coop. Once, in high school, I went into the bathroom to see a kid crying outside a stall that had a massive 8-inch long, black as the night, peanut-spiked turd bobbing in the toilet. I still feel bad for that kid. I watched a horse kill a rattlesnake once, alternated between stomping it with hooves and picking it up to whip it around with its mouth. A few years ago, while visiting family in the south of Spain, I'm from the States, I was out at a bar with my cousin. His girlfriend's family owned the bar, and it was small but packed. I went upstairs to the only bathroom to go pee, opened the unlocked door and walked in on a full 3-person whoopee party in full swing. Butts and bits and everything. Immediately tried to cover my eyes while backing out the door and yelling, "Lo siento! Lo siento!" My cousin, his girlfriend, and her mum ran up and promptly removed them, but I had zero desire to touch anything in the bathroom after that. This was also the first time I ever tried absinthe, and skinny dipped in the Mediterranean for the first time. It was a solid night. This literally happened today. My husband and I were at a stop sign, and a guy comes out of nowhere on a bicycle holding a weed whacker, and there was a huge rabbit in the hood of his coat. Once saw a man proceed to scratch his butt crack inside of his pants, smell his hand, and then eat a sandwich in the same hand on public transportation. That was certainly interesting. One of the stories from the old-timers while doing my plumbing apprenticeship in a factory was about a toilet filled to the top with a number 2. The lead plumber told the old-timer, who was an apprentice at the time, to pull out the number 2. The apprentice said, "No way." The lead plumber then proceeded to scoop out a bare handful, squeeze it where the poop was oozing between his fingers, and then threw it against a wall. He did this until he cleaned the toilet. Then he washed his hands with cold water and then ate a sandwich. I have a farm. I have ducks on one side and pigs on the other. One of my male ducks was awfully willful towards the females, so we put him over with the pet pigs. He could easily leave if he wanted, but he chose to stay. He can be seen laying on top of his beloved potbelly friend, nibbling his ear and making sweet love, while my poor potbelly piggy boy just lays on his side in the sun without a care in the world. I work security on the side. I feel I could give you a different answer every so often. Watched a guy the other day going through boxes of men's shoes and sniffing them, looking for the ones with a foot scent. When he found them, he'd get a little fidgety. Went to the back of the department with a few boxes and was looking around heavily. But there was a family and a bunch of kids around and he left abruptly. No joke, the way he was acting and how he was, positioning things, that guy was about to do the deed with a pair of Nikes. It was some wild crap. Watched another guy one time bust out of the store with about 1,300 in clothes and right into the side of his getaway vehicle, which then ran him the F over. I'm not ashamed to say I laughed my butt off. He lived. People pooping, peeing, whacking the mule, attacking innocent bystanders, robberies, a marriage proposal from a smacked-out junkie, and just so many accidents. You see so much stuff in this job, man. Man, security people have the best stories. My favorite one that kinda relates to you and your snatch and run guy was the guy who picked up a giant flat-screen TV and ran out the door and down the street with it. About 2 minutes later, all you see is him and the TV go flying through a plate glass window back into the store he stole it from. We had to watch the cameras like 5 times before we spotted the tiny 5'2" blonde loss prevention chick do her flying tackle, which is what sent him through that window. The best part was that after he was arrested, he had a chat with the police, and he suddenly burst into tears. Apparently he thought that if they charged him with the theft of it, it was like he'd pay for it. He was determined when he said that they needed to be gentle while loading his TV into the cruiser's trunk. Like the flight through a window was so great for it in the first place. They had to inform him that no, he couldn't keep the TV, and he bawled all the way to the police car.
What is the most overrated video game of all time? At this point, Pokemon. Ever since it got to 3D, it's gone downhill in terms of gameplay quality. I'm not going to argue about Pokemon designs because my issue is how they never got their Super Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. Even the Mega Evolutions are fine, but they keep adding and changing gimmick mechanics to the point it feels like Yu-Gi-Oh!, where every entry has to add their own mechanic, and it makes the overarching game a cluster of rules and modifiers. They milk nostalgia so hard like Sword and Shield. So many Gigamax evolutions, special versions of Dynamax, one on new Pokemon, but most were Gen 1 Pokemon. No other company do I see so shielded from their lack of quality and innovation. We even had a taste of an improved gameplay formula in Arceus and us researching Pokemon. We use It's a Kids game as an excuse to make crap when kids deserve good if not better games than us cause they don't have the knowledge to know it's crap. I gotta wholeheartedly agree with this, not the part about Pokemon being generally crap, just that I do think Pokemon as a franchise is shielded far too much for what people get. I mean, it's one of the most goddamn successful franchises in the entire world, and the games are fine, but that's just it. They're fine. I think Scarlet and Violet did look crap though. Like for me personally, X and Y was the last Pokemon game that I actually bought, and then I borrowed Sword or Shield, I can't remember which one, and it was fine, but I really do expect better from one of the most successful franchises in the entire world. Probably the most successful franchise in the world. I'm gonna stick my neck out and say The Last of Us is a cool story to experience once, but as a video game, it's not some 10 out of 10 mind-blowing experience, and people got way too fanatical about it. I personally really enjoyed The Last of Us. I played through it multiple times. I even did a run where I refused to use guns where the game did not force me to. It's a solid game, but it's also one of those games that basically went, oh, a man can only be interesting and deep and philosophical and sad and vulnerable if he has a child around. Like, you know what put me off 2018 God of War? When, oh, Kratos has a son now, and now he's an interesting character. Kratos was already interesting, you cowards. There were already several segments in multiple games that showed the depth of his anguish at the loss of his family and his vulnerability, which he channels through unyielding violence. Far Cry. The first 3 were ahead of the game, but everything since is just copy and pasted. You mean like everything else that Ubisoft make? Oh, I went there. I actually don't really play Far Cry. I've only played Far Cry Primal on the Wii. I actually have Far Cry 2 on my Steam library because it was like £2 or something like that. So maybe I'll give that a go because this guy said, I've heard the original Far Cries are freaking amazing. But yeah, Ubisoft as a company, I feel like their newer Far Cry games, friggin' Assassin's Creed, they all just kind of blend together in my eyes. I don't really care about them anymore. I used to love Assassin's Creed, and Rayman Origins freaking rock. Like, Ubisoft used to be a good company. Overwatch, it's just a shooter, man. It doesn't deserve the worship that it got, and it consistently underdelivers. People assume it has such a deep lore and world, but it really is a bare bone of a basic concept done to death. I don't take this comment that seriously. I'm not an Overwatch guy. I used to be when it first came out. I played it for ages with friends all the time, but I'm pretty sure the die-hard fans of Overwatch are few and far between at this point, and it is far from an overrated game at this stage. Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, though. Might be a controversial take, but The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I love it and hate it at the same time. I love the potential, but hate the execution. I love the lore around it, but hate how the game shows barely any of it. I love the world, but hate how empty it is. I love the characters, if they had any character at all. I love and hate it with a passion. I never actually finished The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, but, I think it's a case with open world games where it's very easy to lose steam in them. It was just okay, in my opinion. Not like, it was pretty groundbreaking, I guess, for 2011. God, that's old now. But personally, I was just getting super into Monster Hunter at that stage in my life. World of Warcraft. The lengths people will go through to try and keep that game playable is astounding. Combat just feels so clunky and repetitive. Okay, so I love Final Fantasy XIV, but I really don't think like combat is like the biggest thing in World of Warcraft. What I like about World of Warcraft is the world and exploring that world. That is dope as hell, exploring Azeroth. I'm gonna catch some crap for this, but BioShock. It never caught flack for being derivative of System Shock, even to the point of being named in an obvious homage to it. Probably because relatively few people actually played System Shock at that point. But if they had, they might have wished BioShock was more derivative of it, because while BioShock dresses itself with the language of immersive sims, it completely failed to deliver on its initial promise of an open-level, play-it-your-way experience. BioShock is a game where you can sneak, but you can't beat the game by sneaking. You can hack, but you can't beat the game by hacking. Open combat is an inevitability. Similarly, the levels are big and open, but it always has a very clear idea of where you're supposed to go next and how you'll get there. I suppose it's appropriate in an ironic way that BioShock only ever gives you the illusion of choice. Speaking of which, the narrative is overall pretty mediocre, aside from the admittedly well-executed twist everyone talks about. Many of the areas, the only reason you're there is that it was between you and your objective, and that it's kind of the tone. It also mostly fails to integrate its political themes. Rapture's liberation vision failed because everyone got a substance that gave them superpowers but made them insane, not because the original vision was ghastly. Similarly, the communist opposition to it failed because the leader was secretly corrupt from the start. The game never really offers an opinion on whether either idea could work or why they would fail. It just kind of plays in the space for a bit before something else makes the question irrelevant. Yeah, I kind of get where they're coming from. I still enjoy BioShock. I haven't played it for a while, but if you really want a game that's really open in the way that you can approach the entirety of it and win in like very specific ways, then play Dishonored. That is an amazing game. That's the game that I will talk about, and people are probably going to turn around and go, oh, that's so overrated though. No. It's a perfect game, actually. Zelda Breath of the Wild. I am a Zelda fan. I really love the series. I tried my best to get into this game and I wanted to love it, but I just could not as I found it very boring. Fair enough if they feel that way. Personally, I thought that Breath of the Wild is probably one of the single greatest open world experiences in any video game ever. If anything, I'm having more trouble playing Tears of the Kingdom recently. I just cannot get into that game right now. Maybe it's because I'm just so busy and stuff, or I don't know, maybe it's because it feels a bit too similar to the original game with a lot of added mechanics. Sure, but whatever. Listen, it's still good, but in no universe should Ocarina of Time win a best game of all time competition. And yet, I think I disagree with that. I actually think the design philosophy in Ocarina of Time is super good. Z-targeting is still used to this day in many games, although obviously it's not called Z-targeting anymore, it's just lock-on. Like, I don't know, I feel like you could probably take a lot of third-person action games and be like, oh yeah, this kind of originated from Ocarina of Time in this way, you know? I mean, for God's sake, Dark Souls, Elden Ring and all that, it's basically just Ocarina of Time, really, when you get down to gameplay, but it's all polished and smooth and amazing. So personally, I gotta disagree with that. I think Ocarina of Time frickin' rocks, actually. And I ain't even talking from a place of nostalgia. I played that game for the first time all the way through on the 3DS. Controversial opinion, the Dark Souls franchise. I think most of its difficulty is artificially created by clunky controls and a deliberate vagueness about how to tackle enemies. The people who love this game will say these are exactly the things that make it so great and I just need to get good scrub. Opinions differ and that's fine, but for me it feels like a disingenuous way to make things more difficult. I couldn't disagree with this person more. In my opinion, Dark Souls and Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and Dark Souls 3, but not Dark Souls 2, use a lot of context and logic in the way that they do level design and enemy placement. Easy example, Sen's Fortress. If you run straight in there, you will notice that the first thing that happens is you activate a trap. This establishes a tone and establishes what you need to look out for and the kind of things that this place has up its sleeves. And if you don't adapt to stop and analyze the area for dangers and whatnot, where you can and where you feel safe to, then you're gonna be fine. But if you just rough rod right in there, then you're gonna die. I frickin' love Dark Souls. I can't wait for Armored Core, but I feel bad for the OG fans because Armored Core is not Dark Souls. Black and White, Molyneux's magnum opus, was just a glorified Tamagotchi. Never played Black and White 1, but I did love Black and White 2 as a kid. Red Dead Redemption 2, because it's just not fun to play, which, for me, is what a video game should be, Dutch. I'm actually playing through this game for the first time recently, and it's not that it's not fun, but it's certainly a bit annoying when the game, forces me to beat a guy because I need to catch tuberculosis or, the 2-hour intro and stuff. Still a good game, but I agree, it is definitely overrated. Honestly, Final Fantasy VII is extremely overrated. The story isn't that interesting, and the majority of other elements remain the same from previous entries. In my opinion, it only became so popular because it was the first disc-based Final Fantasy game and launched on the PS1 during its amazing sales point. Just about everyone had a PS1. Most of the ads for FF7 were promoting multiple discs, CG cutscenes, advanced graphics, and so on. FF7 released at the right time and at the right place, but it is by far one of the weaker entries. Oh, I shouldn't have chosen this topic. I want to talk about these things so much. But I disagree. I think the original Final Fantasy VII is actually really freaking special. If we're talking about the remake, I don't think it's crap by any means, but I really don't like the changes they made to the remake. I'll leave it there because I've got a job to do, but god damn it, does it pain me not to talk about this in more detail. The Call of Duty franchise, literally the same game every single time. I may have said it earlier, but I don't like military shooters, unless they have, a gimmick to them like Titanfall 2 or something, but I actually don't think every Call of Duty game is exactly the same. If you go back far enough and then go to where we are now, there have been major changes to the game. Maybe now, more recently, the games are probably being more and more similar, but I don't even see them get released as frequently as they used to be. Death Stranding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure upon release, the game actually did not sell that well, at least not in Hideo Kojima's eyes. I heard he had a bit of a fit that people didn't really get the game and that he's an auteur and he's ahead of his time, which I like Hideo Kojima, but I think Hideo Kojima, overall, kind of overrated, actually. Especially since he's been, rubbing elbows with, Hollywood actors and directors and stuff and just shoving them haphazardly into his video games. As much as it pains me to say it, I think Minecraft is pretty overrated. Perhaps not the most of all time, but nonetheless so. I have quite a few friends who absolutely refuse to play anything other than Minecraft, just because they are so convinced that it is the best video game of all time, and all others are trash. I definitely don't agree with that, but that isn't the only reason I think it is overrated. Honestly, Minecraft has lost a lot of its charm over the years. The gameplay is simple and not extremely engaging. The only reason I use it today is for creative builds. Also, it was never and still isn't worth $30 goddamn. I actually haven't played Minecraft since it initially came out. My brother got the beta for it. The Binding of Isaac. Meh. It alright. The Binding of Isaac is super good. I love the way that items pile onto each other to make cool mixtures, but I actually prefer one of the creators' earlier games called Gish. Hogwarts Legacy. Yeah, I think that major attempt at boycotting that game just ended up having the reverse effect that people wanted. Red Dead Redemption 2. I have never played a game that someone went to such effort to build a massive, well-engineered and detailed wilderness, only to fill it with so little that it brought me nearly to tears with boredom. But so many people rave about this game and I will never understand it. Like I said, I've been playing it recently and I do think it's a good game, but I think this is just the problem with massive open world games. There is very little that they can do to fill these worlds in a satisfying way that isn't better done than a small, concentrated world where you can absolutely stuff it to the brim with good, solid content. That can then feed into level design, theming for the area, etc. I'm not going to go into this anymore. Shadow of the Colossus. Apart from visuals, the game was a chore to play. I actually prefer Eco a little more than Shadow of the Colossus, but Shadow of the Colossus to me is more like an experience. There's no other game like it. God of War Ragnarok. I'm sorry, but it just didn't do it for me. Completely underwhelming. Felt more like a mountain climbing simulator than anything. And Kratos literally only kills one frickin' god the entire gameplay. WTF. I get he's changing in a different person, but really, the ghost of Sparta needs help to fight Odin's old female dog butt. And sure, he beats Thor the second fight, but he forgives Thor and doesn't want to hurt him, despite Thor trying to kill his son earlier. there. Instead of God of War, I got God of holding hands and licking buttholes. Little bit extreme at the end there, but no, I get where he's coming from. I still stand by that. People try to say that these new games have more depth than the original ones, but I think it's just people didn't really pay attention to the old games. I have no idea if this was considered good, and I've never played a Kojima game, but Death Stranding. I have never experienced a piece of media so far up its own butt. Like 6 minutes of gameplay in the first 2 hours of the game, the biggest challenge in that time was walking in a straight line, utterly confusing menus, the wild swings between characters staring at nothing and explaining nothing, and ham-fisted exposition, a riveting chase scene except the land is shrouded in fog and the monsters are invisible, a soulless world with like 5 people in it, 2 of which have dead or die in their name, who constantly introduce themselves like they aren't the only people we've ever met, and freedom of camera movement during the interminable cutscenes. If you're going to just make a movie, at least give us cinematography. I swear I only played as long as I did because I couldn't believe the game would continue to be so bad. I'm convinced it's End of Evangelion the game, a double middle finger to his fans who will buy anything of his, so he made a pile of nonsense to watch their mental gymnastics explain why the game is secretly genius. The only reason I might be bringing up some games twice is because people are actually explaining why they didn't like it, and I've never played this game, and that's all I really have to say about it. I played every Borderlands game from start to finish and I hated them. I kept assuming they would suddenly get better and I would understand why people loved them. Nope. I admittedly find the writing of Borderlands 3, which was the latest one that I played recently, abysmal, but I think the games have merits. The shooting's fun, the random gun loot is cool, and yeah, they're okay. Hollow Knight. I get it, Metroidvanias aren't for everyone, it's easy to get lost in it, even with the map to some degree, but god damn it, may the power of Christ compel you! Gears of War, Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy. I don't get why these IPs are so popular. Popularize the third-person cover-based shooter, tracking monsters, fighting monsters, building new weapons to fight more monsters out of the monsters that you previously fought is awesome. One of the first video game IPs to tell an engaging and ambitious narrative. First-person shooters. It doesn't matter what the name is, it's all the goddamn same thing, repackaged over and over and over again. Clearly you don't play enough first-person shooters because they do in fact vary wildly. I absolutely love Hunt Showdown because it's a lot more methodical and slow-paced. I don't feel like I can just die the instant I get ambushed a lot of the time because the guns aren't automatic and whatnot. That's just one example of a first-person shooter I like though. Heavy Rain. I know people crap on it now, but it did very well when it first came out. Same with Beyond Two Souls and Detroit Become Human. David Cage is a funny one. I've not played a single one of his games. I can see that he tries to push the envelope a little bit in his own way, but I kind of put him in the same category as Telltale games, where they're games that I will simply watch someone else play. Cuphead. I never understood the appeal of it. To me, it's just a 2D platformer with quick mechanics and old-fashioned animation style and difficult bosses. I don't think it's a bad game, by the way. I've been playing that with my girlfriend lately, and she's so much better than me at it. She's absolutely carrying the team. But I don't know, I think that Cuphead is sort of an instant classic just based on the amount of time and effort that went into it. Like, if you look at the original trailer, it looks so bare bones compared to what it became. Horizon Zero Dawn. I was excited to play this game when it first came out, and honestly I found it tedious and a bit basic and bland. I'd have preferred it to be a linear game as opposed to open world because there isn't enough in the world for it to be that enjoyable. I think that's just it in the end. Open world games. Open world games are overrated. We need to return to smaller, more directed and concentrated areas in games where, like I said earlier, you can concentrate on theming, you can base level design and missions around it. But most of all, I think it's a big part that people do not like about open world games. You can make traversal of the world more engaging. Any battle royale. It was cool at first, then the novelty of it wore off years ago. It is literally a running simulator, and the design of the mode itself promotes people to play like absolute rats and hide in buildings the whole entire frickin' match. Absolute dog crap, trash piece of crap genre that I can't wait to see die so I can wee on its grave. Not sure if I go that far about my feelings of the genre, but I thought it was cool when they made a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure battle royale game, and then I looked at it and it looked kind of crap. Dare I say, Assassin's Creed is a walking simulator with occasional action and stealth tactics. Yeah, I dropped off Assassin's Creed after Brotherhood, admittedly, mostly because I wanted to play the multiplayer, which I still think is actually a really cool multiplayer mode. Ghost of Tsushima. Game was okay, but it was overhyped in my opinion. I actually think Ghost of Tsushima got absolutely robbed for Game of the Year in 2020. Like, Hades was good, but it was in early access for freaking ages. Like, I know it was the official time where it was finished and everything, but I don't think it even deserved to be there because it was in early access for so long. Honestly, I kind of think the only reason The Last of Us 2 actually won Game of the Year in 2020 is because it met all the ESG regulations. PT. Whenever there is talk about horror games, lots of people talk about it as if it is the pinnacle of horror games. Hell, it was a demo of an eventually shelved product. Yo, I don't care what you say. That game was scary as a mother. I literally dropped my control screaming into my full English dinner while playing it with a friend. But it was also quite maddening to figure out how to proceed in that game. In my opinion, probably GoldenEye. I was playing PC games at the time. Quake, Team Fortress was already out, and my expectations were built up by people who hadn't played an FPS before. Same type of thing happened when Halo released on Xbox, and people acted like it was the first game with LAN play. Had trouble deciding between GoldenEye and Halo, but I at least had some fun with Halo games. GoldenEye always felt like a clumsy attempt to me. I have never had a good time playing GoldenEye, so I agree.
Generally calm people of Reddit, what made you lose your absolute mind that time? It always felt like my parents never wanted me. I was a surprise honeymoon baby born 9 months and a day after their wedding. I was regularly screamed at for anything I did until I just started hiding. I was called, quote, the practice child my whole life. My younger siblings got way more love and attention, etc. In my teens, they started taking in, quote, strays. If any neighborhood kids didn't want to go home, they could just be at our house all the time. Effectively, my mother would take my friends away from me to be her friends instead, one of which was a kid who picked on me constantly from the time I was 11. I guess they had that in common. That guy was kicked out of his dad's house and his mom's house when he was 20, so my parents took him in permanently. That killed me. But I always wanted their approval, so I was always calm and agreeable, always desperately trying to figure out how to get them to love me, so I went along with it. Years later, I married and have a son. This guy still lives with my parents. They continue to coddle and make excuses for him while criticizing me for whatever they feel like. One day, we're all at my parents' house, and my son is being a goofy 2-year-old, which annoys the man-child living there. So he gets furious, picks my son up by his ankle, and spanks him. My parents claim not to have seen it. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night because I was so upset. The next morning, I made sure the guy and my mom would be at home, and why wouldn't he be there? And I went to confront them with my wife. I dumped everything I had been putting up with on them for about an hour, including asking how my mom could allow this jerk to hit my son. She maintained that it didn't happen, so I went through the roof. I ended up crying because of all the pent-up emotion, so my fantastic wife took over. She said we wouldn't be coming back if the guy still lived there, so he yelled that he would move out, and he stormed off after saying he didn't have to listen to this. My parents convinced him not to move out shortly after we left. My mother expressed how disappointed she was that I didn't come, quote, to have a conversation and only came to, quote, dump on them. That was her big takeaway from everything I said, that I wasn't being fair to them. We went to counseling with them later. For months. It validated everything I had felt, but they never stopped lying and being defensive. One counselor said we should be on Dr. Phil. The other counselor said my mom is, quote, incapable of empathy. Both counselors called my parents delusional, but of course, my parents didn't take any of that seriously. At one point, my dad asked me, who does he think he is to judge us like that? As if he forgot that's their job. Haven't spoken with them in almost a year, and life is so much better. My brother and I played travel sports for a few seasons as kids. One trip, I was at the pool with some of his teammates messing around in the water, and the coach's kid was being a jerk as usual. My brother was one of the smaller kids on his team, so the coach's son would screw with him a lot. Most of the kids on my brother's team disliked him, but didn't speak up so they wouldn't be next. He thought it would be funny to pick up my brother's drink right in front of him and spit into it. My dad taught me from a young age not to let anyone screw with my brother or sister, so I got seriously angry. I took a good running start and shoulder-checked him into the pool. Since he had just gotten there, he hadn't taken his clothes off yet and cried because his phone and iPod got ruined. He literally ran out yelling, "I'm telling my dad!" Well, that backfired because everyone stuck up for my brother, and the coach was not happy to find out what a crap bird his son was being, so he was the only one to get in any trouble. Sometimes justice is a dish best served cold, and other times it's served extremely wet. Ruined iPod and all. My grandfather passed away, so I told my boss that I had to take a couple of days off to be with my family. He had the nerve to tell me work was more important than family and threatened to fire me. I went off on him in the middle of the office for a solid 5 minutes before quitting and rushing home. This lady came to the shelter to see the cats. She asked if she could give them treats, and I said yes. It's a shelter where most of the cats are free. So she gets the bag out, the cats are going wild with anticipation, and she just stood there, laughing and tempting them without giving them anything. She looked like she enjoyed their anxiety, and her laugh sounded like a crazy person. I lost it, grabbed the bag out of her hands, gave treats to the cats, and asked her to leave. Those cats are already stressed out. Don't give them more anxiety. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I was home packing my stuff to get ready for when my husband was out of basic training. I never yell or even raise my voice to hardly anyone ever. My dad has always had a wicked temper, and my sister also had a knack for starting yelling matches with him. One night, she forgot to do something she was supposed to, and the yelling started again. I ignored it up until he called her stupid. It got under my skin, so I spoke up a little, saying that he shouldn't call her that. He hollered back, "You are my daughters. I can talk to you however I want." That's when I snapped. I saw red for the first time in my life, and I completely lost it. I screamed back at him at how I was tired of him treating us like garbage when he lost his temper, at how we hid in the back room with my mom until he cooled off, and how all I wanted was to visit my family before I had to move over 12 hours away from them. I also threatened that if he ever wanted to see me again, then he needed to shut up and sit in the corner until he was done throwing a fit. I yelled at him for the first time in my life for a solid 30 minutes. I didn't stop until everything I had to say built over the years was out, and I saw him go from red-faced angry to what seemed to be guilt-ridden. When I finally stopped, he was quiet. He didn't say a word and walked away. Shortly after I moved out, he went to a doctor and has been put on some medication to help with his anger issues. Now, he's super friendly, and I haven't heard him throw a tantrum like he used to in over 10 years now. He has never spoken poorly to me or my sister since then either. I lost my mind when my patient got her pre-authorization for surgery for a large grapefruit-sized pelvic mass denied by BCBS, and when I did a peer-to-peer, the doctor working for the insurance company said I needed to have a psychiatrist rule out mental causes of her pain first. I had to walk away for 30 minutes before seeing another patient because, had anyone given me any more lip, I might have gotten violent. I lost my mind when I was late for work because my colleague asked me to cover their shift and gave me the wrong time, and it was my fault from the company's perspective. This happened in some club ages ago. I was bouncing around on the dance floor with everybody else and apparently stepped on some dude's foot who had been standing there with this posse of 2 or 3 other guys watching people. I shrugged and apologized, then turned around to leave. Right then, quote, somebody smacked me in the back of the head. Not hard, but too hard to ignore. I turned around still calm and said something like, "Look, I'm gonna walk this way, you guys stay here and nothing more needs to happen." Turned around again, got smacked in the head again. I was very much ticked off at that point. It didn't help that they looked at me all innocent. I couldn't even tell which one of them did it. So I just stuck my finger in the face of the dude whose foot I allegedly stepped on and recommended he don't do that again. Turned around once more, waiting to get smacked in the head again. This time, they poured a glass of beer in my back. That's when I completely lost my mind. Threw myself around and went straight at the guy. I was in full rage mode, didn't care what happened next as long as that guy suffered. I could tell by the terrified look on his face he realized he had gone too far. His friends never stepped in to help him. After a while, people separated us, and that was that. I have no sympathy at all for people who resort to violence for solving their problems, but feel no shame for having snapped in that situation. I think I did everything in my power to avoid what eventually happened. So, earlier this year, my health insurance got messed up. I started making too much money to qualify for my state's Medicare, so healthcare.gov requested a notification from NJ Family Care to confirm I wasn't on it anymore. So in January, I called them to get said notification. They say, yeah, you should get it in a couple of weeks. it never comes. Unfortunately, I had forgotten about it until healthcare.gov sends me a message that they're going to raise my insurance costs if I don't get them the message in the next 2 weeks. So I call NJ Family Care again and explain to them the situation. They once again claim they're going to send me the notice and don't. So now, after getting an extension from healthcare.gov about this, I call up NJ Family Care once more and attempt to explain the situation, politely requesting the cancellation notice. But the woman on the phone gets an attitude with me, saying some stupid stuff like, you know this is the cancellation department, right? And I lost my mind. What is your problem? I don't understand why you can't just send me this stupid letter. What's happening over there? Just look in the file and cancel it. Yes, you dog. I know this is the cancellation department. I want a notice that it's canceled. I must have scared the crap out of her because the next thing she said was, I'll go get my supervisor, who solved the problem in 10 minutes, and I got my cancellation notice 3 days later. My friend is bad with math. I was explaining a thing once. It took 10 minutes. He tells me he doesn't get it. So I sit there and explain this thing more deeply. Took 30 minutes. He's like, takes in-ear headphones out of ear. He was covering it with his hand. Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening to you. Found this amazing radio recently. I lost my mind. I worked at a diner with an open kitchen. You can see us, and we can see you. I'm the only cook during the lunch rush when I hear a lady shout, "Hey!" I look over, and a lady sitting in a booth points at me and then does a very condescending come here motion with her finger. I thought something was wrong with her food, so I decide I could run out of the kitchen, leaving 4 orders on the grill, and see what I need to fix. She has no food on her table. She holds her blue soda cup out to me and asks, "What is this?" Excuse me? Why is my root beer in a soda cup and not a mug? I don't know, I'm just the cook. Oh great, another freaking idiot in this freaking place who doesn't know anything. She then proceeds to chew me out because I, the cook, do not know why the server gave her root beer in a cup. We have special root beer mugs, but the servers couldn't find them. Someone misplaced them. I apologize and head back into the kitchen while she's loudly talking crap about me to the next booth to find out that all of my orders are ruined and more have been coming in. It's already stressful working in a kitchen, and that was the last straw. I went in back, started screaming and kicking the crap out of the walk-in cooler. When I went back out, everyone was quiet and avoided eye contact, even the lady with the issues. Still looked pretty mad though. I rushed through the orders and thank God she left without saying anything. I didn't get in trouble though, since my manager was serving and had to deal with her as well. He understood. My friend, who is usually a chill person, had some girl make fun of her brother who was killed, and she ended up beating the crap out of her, smashing her face into the wall and getting kicked out of our school for it. Deserved. I was in charge of a rollover trainer once at a military training site. Think of a Humvee on an axle that spins, like a rollover accident. Part of the safety brief before anyone goes in is to empty their pockets of all items. Take any items on belts off. We have rubber items inside to simulate stuff flying. We do this for safety's sake. Part of the training is we stop the trainer on its side/roof so the participants can get exposure to assisting the other passengers and exit the vehicle safely and quickly. It's been a long, boring as crap day, and like all good army training, I am hungover and irritated. All officers, and they are listening for crap. We stop the exercise on the roof for a group, and they all exit except one who can't undo the seatbelt. I open the door and reach in and placed my hand on a dual-edge 4-inch boot knife. I absolutely lost my mind. I saw red, my ears burned, and I distinctly remember seeing one of the other instructors mouth, "Oh crap." I chewed out every freaking officer there, all of whom outranked me, many of whom outranked my commander. Didn't matter, as my position was safety officer. I went on a tirade. I turn around after it was done, and my best friend is freaking recording it on his phone. That jerk showed that clip the rest of the week and for years after him. I miss that sucker every day. Update, sadly, that video is long gone, I imagine. Yes, I am former military, gladly retired. My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently been diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat, quote, hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job, and our insurance and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break, and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. "He needs a beating," a fat 20-something said, not so quietly to our friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop, and I got on the verge of Bukowskian poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-face friends. I launched into the smell of her genitalia, how fat she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind drunk moron with a death wish, as she was uglier than the devil's butthole on fire with a crap of heck. And it only progressed from there. F. Lee Ermey's Marine Drill Sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it, and this was a goddamn food court in a crappy southern town filled with crappy inbred, hell-spawn, redneck, ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrassed normal troglodytes. The food court was silent, and all the eyes were upon us. And then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a pus-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day. My 7th freaking trip to the DMV when trying to reinstate my license. Every single time, they scrutinized my paperwork and always managed to find something wrong and would send me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally resorted to, "You have no proof that you ever had a license," despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record, among other things. I refused to leave the seat and said, "You people are monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed that I had had a license, but there was just no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked it. I said I refused to leave the seat until I knew exactly what was needed. Manager said, "Tell you what, I can contact last state I lived in and can get a verification that I had had a license there. It would take 3 minutes." That's when I yelled in the DMV, "Why wasn't that the first thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. I grew up on a farm, and one day, several cows decided that since their head could fit through a small hole in a gate, then their whole body could fit through a small hole in a gate. This resulted in a broken gate, a cow stuck in the broken gate, several cows roaming freely in a field after escaping through the broken gate, and me absolutely losing my mind. I now work in IT. Cows are dumb. Username Recovering Farmer checks out. In 6th grade, a group of some 4 kids took monopoly of the back of the bus, a true power move. I always minded my own business and tried to sit away from them. For one, they all didn't understand basic hygiene and smelled even though they were older than me. Anyway, turns out the bus driver was their quiet retired grandpa who would never tell them to stop bullying or doing dumb crap. So one time, they have a freaking spitting war. As in, they spit across the seats at each other as they jump seats for cover. At one point, I was the seat in the middle, and a giant wad of their disgusting spit hit me square in my face. I then proceeded to take my Pearson history book, one of those big, heavy, hardcover textbooks, and smash them over the head with it. Granted, this was me telling them to stop their nonsense several times. The spitting stopped after that. Anyway, the book cover cracked and I had to pay for it at the end of the year, but I regret nothing. This guy at work was, quote, cleaning out the work break room. Basically, he was throwing out people's personal belongings. So, I see my new coffee mug I bought specifically for work in the trash and lost my mind. I started yelling at him that what he was doing was morally wrong and it's not his stuff to throw out. I went to my HR manager and complained to him about the principle of the thing. I took all the coffee mugs in the trash out and washed them. The good thing is, if you are a calm person 99% of the time, people are more likely to listen to you in the 1% of moments you lose it. Exactly. I used to waitress and never caused any drama. I was there to make money for my wedding. I showed up on time, didn't take smoke breaks, never on my phone, and rolled with the punches. The 2 best compliments of my life came from my manager. One was him thanking me for not making him know my fiance's name. I never had problems to deal with at work like the other girls, and I didn't chit-chat. And when all heck was breaking loose, he called me his calm little Hindu calf, which still makes me laugh. Anyway, this jerk of a cook wouldn't stop calling me pet names and trying to touch me. Every time I said loudly and clearly, "Don't touch me," and "My name isn't Sweetheart, it's Hopeful Kitty." Everyone knew how I felt, and they tried to tell me, that's just how he is, let it go. I told them that the way I am is that I don't want him to touch me. When the manager talked to him, he'd stop for a few weeks, then start again. After months of this, I told the manager if it didn't stop, I was going to file a harassment complaint. Manager talked to the owner and asked if he'd rather have the cook or me because I was on the verge of quitting, and they agreed they'd rather have me 100 times over this dude. He was gone by the next day, and I got an escort to my car every night. Turns out, if you are drama-free and calm, people really listen when you have a problem. I lost it on a nurse in a nursing home once in my fire/EMS days. We ran a call there at 8 a.m., and she said she had just got there and didn't know anything about the patient or their condition. Alright, plausible enough. Run there again at 11 a.m., same nurse, same story. Okay, fine, maybe you haven't had enough time to actually catch up on your patients. We're annoyed at this point, but keeping our crap to ourselves. 1:30 p.m. rolls around, and we get another call to the same place. Same nurse. Exact same response as the first 2 times. I lost my cool and started yelling at her in the hallway outside the patient's room. I was livid. How have you been here for at minimum 5.5 hours and still don't have any info on any other patient? It was absolutely unacceptable, and I let her know that in no uncertain terms. She called my chief and I got yelled at for verbally harassing a nurse. 3 months later, we get a call to the same place for an 85-year-old woman with an altered mental status. We get there, it's the same nurse. Yet again, same bullcrap answer that she didn't know the status, but stated that a tech had checked in on the woman 15 minutes ago. We go in the room and this woman is dead. Like, dead. Full rigor, emptied bowels, the works. We tell her this and she panics and runs in and starts CPR. We're like, no, she dead. Obvious signs of death and there is no working this patient. She was fired the next day.
Guys who married bridezillas, what happened after the wedding? My first wife was a bridezilla. During our honeymoon, she realized she was married and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the actual marriage. The next 2 years were miserable until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid, and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. That's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wanted, including 2 wedding dresses. I have a feeling this is how a lot of these stories are gonna go. They wanted the big wedding, and then once it's over, they realize they don't really care so much anymore. One of my coworkers married a bridezilla. I'll try to just hit the bullet points of what happened leading up to, during, and after the wedding, but it's still a lot. The moment he proposed, she lost any interest in any woohoo. According to him, she also basically stopped acting like the woman he fell in love with and started acting like her real self, which was completely crazy. A week after he proposed, she quit her job because her full-time job was now planning the wedding. The wedding was horrible, but I'm getting there. She had a fight with his mother because the bride demanded the groom's mom pay for half the wedding, but get 0 input, and wasn't allowed to contribute to the guest list, which was 95% the bride's friends and family. The bride, who was 30 years old, subsequently egged her future mother-in-law's house. When the bride and groom had a fight about the egging, he went to work the next day and she shaved her head and sent him a video of her screaming and sobbing as she buzzed her hair off in the bathroom. I worked with him. He showed me the video when he said he had to leave. I strongly urged him to have her assessed by a psychiatrist. Jump to the wedding. It was in a pool clubhouse in the summer. It was way too small for the 150 plus people they invited. Someone forgot to turn the AC on until after the place was packed. A lifeguard showed up in a swimsuit to turn it on, but it did little given it was already sweltering. 2 rows of chairs in the clubhouse were ribboned off with reserved signs on them, so no one sat in them. They were later occupied by the 6 seated bridesmaids, leaving about a dozen open chairs once the wedding started. The one groomsman stood by the groom and didn't sit. Elderly people were left standing or reduced to sitting on the floor, as there was no way to get to the chairs once the ceremony started. The bride showed up 90 minutes minutes late, having been unhappy with her hair, which I assume was a wig, and makeup. So she took it all off and did it herself. So all the guests are standing there for an hour and a half waiting for her. The groom was literally standing at the altar sweating his butt off in a wool suit in the South's high summer, and was clearly not sure if she would show up. He looked like he felt sick. When the bride showed up, she burst into the clubhouse, marched down the aisle, and snapped at the officiant to hurry up and get started. During the prayer, while the religious groom had his head bowed, she turned to wave at everyone. I don't pray, so I was looking up. Then she told her mother to go get her some water. She drank a bottle of water during the prayer and kept grinning and waving at people in attendance, paying zero mind to her groom in front of her. When the ceremony was over, tables were crammed into the clubhouse, and apparently only family and immediate friends of the bride had seats at tables. The rest of us were going to be standing outside during the reception. So I didn't see a dance, a speech, the cake cut, nothing. The food was served outside in the southern US July heat, with bugs everywhere. The bride made the groom go get her food over and over. He meekly stood in line with the other 150 people, until people insisted he go sit and let them get the food. Nope, she told him to get the food, so he said he had to be the one to get her food. She never left her table, never greeted any of her guests. Apparently, they had a massive fight as they were leaving the following day for the honeymoon. The bride laying all the failures of the wedding she planned at him and his mom's feet. She threw his luggage out of the car and tried to drive to the airport by herself. But he had their tickets and jumped on the hood to stop her from driving off in his car. He got fired about a month after the wedding because he kept showing up late, leaving early, and leaving in the middle of the day, usually because she called him with some crisis. 1 year after the wedding, I got a thank you note for my wedding gift, which was signed by just the bride with a note that said, "As you may have heard, Ryan and I have had a bumpy start in our first year as a married couple, and we're separated now. Thanks for the lovely gift." They divorced a couple months later. You know, I know what I was getting into with this thread, but I can't help but just feel bad for all these guys. I married a groomzilla, bent over backwards to make the wedding as magical as he wanted. I would have been happy in someone's backyard with a potluck. He admitted in couples counseling 7 years later that he never really wanted to marry me, so much as he just wanted a huge show and party. Everyone liked and approved of me, so he wanted them all to see he was making a good choice and be envious. He wanted them to be proud of him. We used up most of the money I got from a car accident settlement. Could have put a down payment on a small house. He asked for a divorce in 2020. They had an expensive $75,000 wedding. After they split up, it turned out the bride never turned in the paperwork to make their marriage legal. The groom didn't even know he wasn't married until he wanted to file for divorce. The bride never returned the gifts either, even though they never really got married. She just lied to everyone about it. I don't know how many people know she never got married. This sounds like it would be illegal in some way, no? My brother married a bridezilla. She yelled at my mother on the day of for asking her where she wanted certain decorations at the reception site. There wasn't a written plan, so my mom had nothing to go off of. Never thanked my parents for financially contributing to the wedding. Accused a bridesmaid of trying to upstage her by getting a spray tan before the wedding. My brother wanted me to be in the wedding party, but she told him to his face that I was too pretty to be in the wedding party and all of her bridesmaids had to be less attractive than her. She stole my sister-in-law's jacket in the middle of the reception. Literally took it right off her back, because one of the bridesmaids was cold. It was a night reception in the spring. The girl should have brought a jacket. The list goes on. Well, they got divorced about a year later because apparently her demanding attitude carried over into the marriage. Needless to say, the rest of my family had a little party when we heard about the divorce. She sounds like a piece of work, but is there literally any compliment more objectively true than being told you're too attractive for the wedding party by a vapid narcissist? Not a bridezilla, but a groomzilla. A friend of my father was remarrying. It was both his and his bride's second time around. both in their early 40s, and an arranged marriage. The guy was an utter groomzilla. He demanded that everything be at top-notch hotels with obscenely expensive catering and hired string quartets and whatnot for the entertainment. Mostly paid out of the bride's family's pocket, I might add. The parties on the night leading up to the main wedding event were opportunity enough for him to make a rather public fool of himself, talking at the top of his voice and showboating the entire time. But the kicker came the next day, when the bride was missing from her own wedding reception. Obviously, it was very odd and conspicuous, and the few relatives from her side made some non-committal excuses for her not feeling well. Turns out, this jerk had divorced the poor woman right after he'd had his wedding night fun. He said that he didn't like her enough, and that's an almost literal quote. So he gave her the divorce papers, and that was it. The marriage was officially over before the festivities even ended. That's gotta be close to a record turnaround time, right? But seriously, that guy is a massive jerk. My cousin was married to one. He comes from a very not wealthy area and has become successful himself after moving out of his hometown. His wife was extremely wealthy, even could say excessively. They married after a year of knowing each other, and boy was it a surprise to hear about the wedding plans. They spent over $250,000 on the wedding, including catering by 5 to 7 different restaurants. Their food was from different cultures and cooked in front of you. Think almost hibachi buffet style. They even had servers in tailed suits and white gloves serving Taco Bell after midnight once everyone was drunk. Once they got married, she was spending more money than he could make. She was getting mad because he wasn't making enough, while she wasn't working and they hadn't had any kids. They got divorced, and she gave him the ultimatum of getting his ring back or keeping the dog. He kept the dog. Her sister, a lawyer, helped her file a restraining order on him, and they haven't spoken since. Screw her, but man did he dodge a bullet. $250,000 is an insane amount of money for a wedding. Our guy made the right decision keeping the dog, though. I married a groomzilla. We're talking costume changes between wedding and reception, yelling at the wedding planner, dragged out fights about whether we can add fruit kebabs so people would get enough to eat, everything. There was zero compromise. He made a lot of promises for things I had been wanting after the wedding, and they never materialized, like a beach vacation and such. Turns out, no compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else, so I left him after 4 years of marriage. Best decision ever. No compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else is probably about the best way you could sum up this entire thread. A friend of my husband's, who he's known since they were kids, so about 20 years now, married a bridezilla. She's evangelical and religion is pretty much her life, and he was agnostic, a nice metalhead geek guy. They asked us to be the best man and woman. Me and my husband are both tattooed, and when we arrived at the wedding, we were his only friends. Everyone in that big wedding was from her, now also his, church. Well, the preacher kept saying to him he had his old life and now his new life, his old friends and now the new friends, yada yada yada. But all the time criticizing his old ways, the authentic way. And everyone kept looking at me and my husband like we were beasts. Worst day ever. She's that kind of person that wants to be an influencer. Every single thing is in her Instagram. Their relationship seems perfect there, but he always seems so unhappy, so apathetic, especially when we used to see him. Always talking about how things are so different, how things are like she wants. Her stories are basically her saying he does nothing right. It's even humiliating. She made him stop talking to us. This last week, he got out of every group we had. He stopped answering my husband, who's very sad that he lost one of his friends. I believe she's the one replying with the few weird messages he does get. That's the bridezilla. It seems very common for the bridezilla to act on social media, but in real life, it's all messy. It honestly sounds like these two were very different from each other when they got married. Like, these two lifestyles don't really mesh together. I feel like he must have known he was going to be giving everything up to marry her. My girlfriend of 10 years is very down-to-earth and level-headed. We finally decided to get married later this year for a few reasons, and she's feeling a lot of phantom pressure to do things a certain way. It's not like there's an overbearing mom or catty friends applying pressure or expectations. It's just the whole idea is overwhelming and filled to the brim with opportunities to make a decision you might end up regretting later, or forever. I've taken a more active role in narrowing down options instead of asking her to pick a perfect solution out of 5 million possible options. It's helped somewhat, but there's still a lot of pressure on her, seemingly out of nowhere, to make a series of decisions that all depend on the first few big decisions that are weighing heavily on us. All this to say, I can see how this kind of stuff could turn a normal woman into a lunatic. These types of events tend to bring latent family and friend drama to the forefront, and emotions are high before anything even really gets started. My guess is that a lot of bridezillas were actually lovely people who calmed down and returned to being lovely people after the stress of wedding stuff is removed. This is the other side of the coin. Planning a wedding does have a lot involved, and there are a lot of general expectations. It's understandable how a normal person could get overwhelmed. Before reading these comments, I thought a bridezilla was a woman huge and strong enough to be compared to Godzilla, and entered the thread eagerly expecting to read stories about grooms getting lifted and carried off into the sunset on their wedding day. I'm very disappointed. My uncle married one. She had a spending problem, went clubbing in her 40s thinking she was 20, acted like she was better than everyone, couldn't keep friendships, and cheated on my uncle with a man 10 to 15 years her junior. My uncle is remarried and happy now. Sounds like she never quite grew up and just wanted to live her life as a party. That's definitely a red flag. Been married 14 years now. She's definitely a pain in the butt sometimes, but so is everyone else. I'm also pretty laid back, so a lot of decisions I leave to her because I just don't care. If it's a decision I do care about, I make the decision. Without her, I wouldn't have the 3 best kids on earth. She's an amazing mom, and our kids have our best qualities. We have fun all the time. I think she was a bridezilla not because she was a crazy person. It was more about making the moment right for everyone and making it a great memory. She had a relatively rough life with her parents, and there weren't a ton of great memories. I noticed she goes way out of her way to make great memories for the kids, as she's always planning stuff for us to do with them. I'm gonna keep her. I married a bridezilla. In the 18 months we were married, she was such an unfit mother with too many instances to list here that when the divorce was finalized, I got custody of our kid and the kid she had prior to our marriage. Also, she was a blackout drunk and cheated on me with several different men. The final straw was when I had to travel out of state to check on my grandmother. I came back a day early, saw used Marlboros in the ashtray, not her brand, and I don't smoke, and then I heard grunting and groaning in the bedroom. Yep, there she was, and there he was, and there he was. Devil's Triangle. I contacted a divorce lawyer the next day, finalized it as fast as possible. Ding ding ding, we have a winner. My uncle married this lady who was an insane bridezilla and put him into an enormous amount of debt because she wouldn't settle for anything less than her perfect dream wedding. She had the marriage annulled after the fancy honeymoon and said she didn't want to be his wife, but she always wanted to have her dream wedding. Jerk. My cousin was an unbelievable bridezilla. About a year after their horrifying wedding, her husband convinced her to seek help for her mental health. 5 years later, she's in a much better place and they're happy. Just in case anyone wanted a happy story. My girlfriend's former friend was a bridezilla. Didn't smile once at her own wedding because she was too busy freaking out over insignificant details. Although she has a master's degree with unpaid college loans, she's now a permanent stay-at-home mom, an anti-vaxxer, and a conspiracy theorist. She spends her days getting into Facebook beefs with anyone who isn't woke enough. No idea how her husband hasn't gone crazy, cause as far as I know, he's not into any of that. She sounds like exactly the type of person you would expect a stereotypical bridezilla to be. My sister decided to marry a fellow she'd been with for less than 4 months. Second marriage. It was spur of the moment, with less than 1 month notice. Let's all fly across Canada for a lovely East Coast wedding. Flying across Canada is expensive. Anyways, I had just started a new job and it was imperative that I be there at work during her wedding time. Not the slightest option of time off. I would have been let go. She didn't talk to me for over a year. The marriage lasted around a year, if that. She took him for everything. He lost his house, his car, and drank himself out of his job. She even took his dog. Other family members stepped in and gave him his dog back. She's a peach. Single if anyone's looking. My first marriage was to a bridezilla. She got drunk before the ceremony and wouldn't dance because she was too anxious people would make fun of her. She tried bragging to my cousins during the dinner that our wedding was better than theirs. The four of us got married in a 2-year span. She invited her ex-boyfriend to the ceremony that I later found out she had been sleeping with both before and after our wedding. She took the money we'd received as gifts and were planning on using for a house down payment and spent it on random crap. She had a ton of debt that she kept from me as well. I left her a year after to the day and never looked back. I'm now happily married to a great woman. Obviously, hindsight yada yada, but there were a lot of red flags I should have noticed. Here are some of the big things she did after the wedding. She spent money quicker than she could make it. I ended up having to take on a second job, and I already worked 50+ hours a week, all just to cover the bills. She started using substances and stopped going to work. She would visit her friends in the evening. Found out later on she was going to her boyfriends. The final straw was when I found out what she was doing with the money. I didn't know at first she was into substances. Online payment of bills weren't as popular when we were married, so I would give her the money to go and pay some during banking hours. One day, I got pulled over and charged with no insurance on my vehicle. Turns out she was taking the money for bills and buying substances. When the notices for no payment would come in the mail, she would hide them or rip them up. I handed her the separation papers on our 1-year anniversary. I, 21-year-old female at the time, married a groomzilla, 25. I wanted to elope because I didn't like the idea of being stared at by people. He demanded a wedding of 200+. He had my parents build a giant gazebo on our farm. Said he'd help pay for building costs. Me and my dad built it by hand with our neighbor. He was always working. Don't get me wrong, he helped a few weekends, but it was a year-long project. Shortly after the wedding, we retired to our hotel, and he didn't want to consummate. I was like, okay, long day, I get it. 3 months into a sexless marriage, I walk into him banging our 60-ish-year-old male neighbor. I opened my bedroom door, saw what was happening, said I was sorry, shut the door, got my dog, and drove home to mommy and daddy as stayed away. Why did I say I was sorry and not yell? I'll never know.
Bug exterminators of Reddit. What was your "we're gonna need a bigger boat" moment? Spent the summer between high school and college working for a local, family-run exterminating company. Nice gig. Residential treatments during the day, mosquito fogging at night, and the occasional dairy farm treated for flies and rats. One day, I'm at one of these dairy farms and enter the milking parlor to spray and set up traps. See a rather large cat across the parlor from the front door. Good for him, I think, growing fat, eating rodents, and whatever else he's caught over the years. I enter the parlor, and the cat moves, and I realize the cat is not a cat, but a rat. Easily the size of a 12 to 15 pound feline and running down a drainage pipe. Decided that I did not want to be a sacrifice to the Rat King that day and noped out of there fast. Rats, rats, where the rats? I'm not an exterminator, but that didn't stop my aunt from asking me and my brother from taking care of a hornet's nest. I figured that I could handle it. Heard somewhere that WD-40 supposedly kills hornets, so one night we go over with a can of spray foam and a half dozen cans of WD-40. It was quiet, so I quickly spray the entrance shut with the foam and we go to town on it with the WD. That's when we heard an unholy and frankly terrifying sound come from the nest. We should have ran, but we kept spraying. However, the hornets were not going without a fight. They somehow tore open another entrance and poured out. That's when we started running. Luckily, I parked my car close by and had the doors open, but I had a couple dozen stings, as did my brother. 2 out of 10 would not try it again. That said, the hornets did abandon the nest, and a couple of days later when the swelling went down, we went back, cut the branch down, and lit the nest on fire. It went up in a puff of flame and smoke, so that was fun. But never again am I going up against hornets without calling an exterminator first. I developed a phobia of wasps in the last couple of weeks. I deal with industrial batteries for forklifts, order pickers, stuff like that. We had a 3-day job down in Eugene where we basically had to just pressure wash a crapload of batteries. The customer had to set up outside underneath this metal overhang, during the hottest week in Oregon history, mind you, so that sucked as well. There were nests all along the underside of the overhang, and their occupants were less than thrilled with our presence there. On the 3rd day, we were finally wrapping up, and there were a few older batteries that we needed to prep for shipping because the customer was getting rid of them. One of them was on a busted pallet, so we needed to move it to another one. To do this, you take a strap with 2 hooks on it and hook it to either side of the battery. Well, I go to hook it up, and when I put the hook into the lifting eye of the battery, a crapload of wasps flew out of it and attacked me. I say this with no pride whatsoever. There is no manly way to run away from a swarm of angry wasps. I frolicked out of there as fast as my butt could frolic. Then, I grabbed a broom and used it to open up the lid of this battery, at which point I find the wasps have built a gigantic nest inside the battery. The lid is maybe 3 feet long, probably 10 inches across. These suckers built up all along the bottom of it. They were hanging out inside the battery cells where all the acid and lead and fun stuff is. So yeah, we didn't ship that one. Not dealing with mutant acid-soaked wasps. Pulled back insulation in a crawl space to track termite damage. About 100 plus baby/juvenile cottonmouths came out from where the dryer vent wasn't hooked up properly, keeping them nice and warm and moist in the insulation as fall approached. I'm only a termite exterminator. Got out that crawl space quicker than lightning. To this day, I'm sure the termites and snakes are living under there happily ever after. Got called out to a house that had a roach problem. So, I walk in the house, and I crap you not, you could barely see the color of the walls and ceiling for all the roaches. It was literally raining roaches from the ceiling. The people inside just sitting around, like it's a normal Monday, and laughing about catching roaches falling from the ceiling. Without a doubt, the most disgusting thing I've encountered. Edit. Forgot to mention, I opened the cabinets and I'll never forget seeing the hundreds of thousands going across their pots and pans. It's raining roach! Hallelujah, it's raining roaches! I worked at a gas station on overnights and asked my manager to do something about the spider infestation. I hate spiders, and it was so bad customers started going to other places because these big spiders would build webs over the door in the span of 40 minutes between customers, plus the entire awning and overhang was just a mess of webs and hanging spider nests. So, she goes out and buys some spray, and it barely does anything. So she goes and buys a bunch of spray and is standing outside one day just spraying the awnings and overhang, the doors, air pump, etc. Anyways, there was this large crack in the siding, so she stuck the spray nozzle inside and started spraying. I'd have died. What followed was so bad, I probably would have died from terror. The way she described it, after the screaming stopped and the color came back, was as if someone turned a great big faucet on. Hundreds of spiders just came pouring out like water. Must have been a ton of nests inside there. Not an exterminator. Get used to hearing that, by the way. Screw it, since we're all just sharing our worst anyway. My apartment's got an indoor trash chute under the kitchen sink. It has a habit of falling open by itself, and pests crawl up and into our house from it. Roaches, the works. We've been fighting them for weeks. Eventually, 17-year-old me comes up with the brilliant plan of doing a seal. I use trash bags and some strong tape to make an airtight seal around the offending chute. I do 3 layers of magic. The barrier works. The roaches couldn't cross into our realm from theirs. 3 years later, we start finding small dead roaches in the kitchen, maybe one in the toilet. I've forgotten all about the dark forces I banished years ago, and I'm mystified. The bodies start getting bigger as the weeks pass. Eventually, we start finding live specimens, and they're pretty large. I finally twig that perhaps the ancient seal has been breached. I get on down to the compartment under the sink and open it up. Horror. The roaches had slowly bitten through the seals and ended up breeding within the layers of the seal. Eventually, they got through the final seal, and as the breach grew wider, larger and more vicious bugs got through. I could see them roiling and seething in a bunch within the plastic. I realized what a huge mistake I made all those years ago, and now the evil was back for me. I ended up bringing in some industrial-strength pesticide and fighting through the outer guard to get to the breach. I couldn't let any survivors past me or would get into the house. I pushed a tube into the breach and made a temporary seal around it with more tape and let loose with the pesticide. I could hear the roaches scrambling in the plastic, getting more hectic as they started to die. Fighting continued as I was still rounding up survivors who escaped and putting them down while the pesticide did its work. Once I heard nothing from the seal, I tore it down. It was carnage, beyond disgusting. That motivated us to tear that crap out and get a new roach-proof chute installed. And I got an idea for a fantasy setting for my creative work. We have a problem with Japanese beetles. Like, a big one. I bought a trap after seeing 10 or 20 hanging out on my roses. But then, the trap was completely full within an hour. We're talking thousands of beetles caught in just an hour. So I go to investigate. Surely they didn't all come from my roses, right? So I start checking my trees, a few here and there until I get to this crepe myrtle at the very edge of the yard. It was literally covered in beetles, as in the beetles were screwing. Hundreds of thousands of beetles. My dad decided the best thing to do was to shake the tree and scare them off. That was the worst idea. Beetles rained from the heavens. The sky was dark and swirling with beetles. They covered me, even though I had retreated to a safe distance, sticking in my hair, crawling in my clothes. Dad stopped, dropped, and rolled. As these beetles were stirred into action, so were all of the beetles from all of the trees beyond. It was Armageddon. I was not convinced I would survive this. A few days later, Dad, dressed in a makeshift hazmat suit, went out and doused every tree with the most toxic bug killer he could find. Even now, weeks later, we have to pick the stiff corpses of beetles out of our dog's fur whenever he comes inside. I still have nightmares. Screw Japanese beetles. I'm not an exterminator, but I do bee removals for a living. The most honey I pulled out of a house was about 250 pounds. That's about 21 gallons of honey. I had to leave halfway through to go to Home Depot because I only had 3 to 5 gallon buckets with me. People sometimes try and kill hives with Raid. While it may be effective in some cases, no one is going to call me when it works. In other cases, it backfires spectacularly. For most of her life, the queen is fat to lay eggs. She can fly, but only short distances. So sometimes, when you spray a hive, you'll annoy the bees enough for them to abandon the hive and try to start a new one, but the queen is too fat, so they'll only move to another spot in the same house. The workers at the old hive will raise a new queen, and now you have 2 hives. I removed 7 different hives at the same house because the guy never caught on to what he was doing and kept spraying the bees. Not an exterminator, but this happened to a friend of mine in college. He was in a frat and actually lived in the frat house. During one of the parties they threw, a water pipe was broken. They didn't stop the party or really even act like it happened, so there was just water all over the place. Eventually, they just shut off the water, but didn't call any kind of plumber/cleaner for the water that was probably an inch deep on the floor. Instead, they set up little stepping stones to make it out of the front door without getting in water. However, because there was so much stagnant water just sitting around, mosquitoes were breeding like crazy. I crap you not, you couldn't be in the house for more than 5 minutes without getting 50 mosquito bites. The worst place I've ever been. They were eventually kicked out of the house when the frat advisor saw what happened, called the landlord, and the landlord had seen what happened. My husband and his first wife had a spider infestation in their backyard one summer. It started with spiders in their cedar hedges, a few. They knew they were in trouble when the entire hedge turned white from the webs. My husband goes to the hardware store and gets some malathion, dons a hazmat suit, and goes outside to start spraying. As he sprays, the cedars start to shake. The entire 6-foot-high hedge is shaking, spiders start dropping on him, and he drops the malathion and runs. A week later, all the grass is now white too. He calls 2 different exterminators who say F this, but also tell him to call the Ministry of Natural Resources. Resource officer comes out, looks, explains what the spiders are. I don't recall the species, but they were big. And apparently, the eggs can lay in gestation for decades, waiting for exactly the right environment. Apparently, they like to lay nests in wood. Being the Ministry of Natural Resources, they don't offer to kill the spiders, naturally. He is out of options and has to wait until the frost kills all of these suckers. In Canada, frost comes usually October-ish, so frost comes, never has he been so thrilled to greet a Canadian winter. Next spring, he calls his buddy, kind of a roughneck, to help him dismantle the wood shed in the back of the yard, which is assumed to be the nesting grounds. As my husband and his then wife cower inside, they watch out the kitchen door as Buddy tears down to the shed to burn at his farm. The shed's rafters are covered in what looks like pillows, clouds, foam. All the rafters are positively bathed in spider eggs. Buddy dismantles the shed, puts it in his trailer, and takes all of the wood and the nest to the farm for cremation. Buddy also has a terrific time going up to the window and taunting them with the rafters. As an epilogue, just when they think this nightmare is over, one spring day they have a nice bath, and as they get out of the tub, there is a large spider, the same species, on the outside of the tub. He crushes it with a CD case. It's so large, it made a crunch. That must have been the last one, as they never returned. Freaking horror show. TLDR, entire backyard is bathed in spiders, no help available, have to wait for winter to kill them off. Turns out the old wooden shed was the breeding ground. Beekeeper, but most of us are somehow in the wasp removal business too. Mentor thought he saw a small hornet's nest and took about the precautions of making a dainty wasp trap out of vinegar in an old Sprite bottle. Upon realizing the hellacious magnitude of these little suckers, he filled an outdoor vac with dishwater, set the hose under his gutter, and set the thing to suck. He's already emptied out 3 gallons of hornets. Bye, buttholes. Not a bug exterminator, but the first apartment I ever got after college I now refer to as Crap Hole. There were lots of off things about Crap Hole, like how people like to break my apartment's windows, or how, upon move-in, the dishwasher turned out to be just for show and inoperable. Crap Hole was street level. The basement level, which I discovered via a crawlspace door hanging open into the alleyway that led to the washer/dryer area, was filled with abandoned construction supplies, to the brim. As in, old paint and wood and screws toppling out of the crawlspace. I knew it was a cesspool. I knew pests probably lived there. I figured raccoons, and decided to get on the lookout for a new apartment. The day of move out, the day I need to pack all my stuff, I'm showering in the 2x2 foot shower stall, and something touches my feet. It's red, with long crooked antenna, but it's small. Just as I kick it off, 3 more appear. Baby German cockroaches have hatched in the drain of my shower stall. They're crawling up through the drain and onto my feet, up my legs, up the walls. Within seconds, they're everywhere. I ran out of the bathroom, still wet and soapy, and slammed the door. Nope. This is Crap Hole, and no door fits its frame. The cockroaches come bursting out through the crack underneath it. I rush to the bedroom, shampoo in my hair, my body wetting the whole floor behind me, and shake my boyfriend awake. Before I can even tell him what's happening, there's a meow, meow down the hall. My cat had been in the bathroom while I showered. Crap. I run back, will myself to open the bathroom door, where roaches are still scampering under the cracks and desperate mew mew sounds are emanating. I open it. The roaches are climbing the mirror, they're in the shower curtain. I find my cat, a baby roach on his side, one in his whiskers, and flick them off, grabbing him and carrying him outside. So there we sat, outside our apartment, the 3 of us trying to figure out what to do at this point. All we want is to get out of Crap Hole, and now every item we own is infested. Now, no matter what we do, Crap Hole will follow us, and it'll screw not just us, but our new neighbors, our new neighborhood too. We Googled it. We put everything we owned in an XXL black double-thick garbage bag meant for yard work from Home Depot. We filled each bag with pesticide. We moved the bags to our new apartment and let them sit out on the patio for 2 days. We slept on wood floors. We bought all new groceries. We bought 2 new towels. 2 days pass. We open the bags and nothing moves. We wash all the clothes/linens. I haven't seen a cockroach since. But F that apartment. F you, Crap Hole. May you burn to the ground. Obligatory, I'm not an exterminator, but my dad and stepmom held their wedding at our house. They wanted something small, close family and close friends only. Basically like an average get-together with cake and a ceremony. They got Italian food catered, and it was overall an amazing time. Fast forward to maybe 2 or 3 days after, I was cleaning up the last of the mess from the party, and I go to take the garbage out. There are a handful of flies around the garbage, but I think nothing of it because, well, it is trash after all. I had 2 bags of garbage in my hands, so I kinda have to kick the garbage can open. I kick it open, it flings open, and there is a sea of maggots. We're talking in the tens of thousands at the very least, maybe hundreds. I couldn't see any garbage beneath them. I had kicked it open with such force that many of them had flung out and onto me. I was wearing Old Navy flip-flops and oversized basketball shorts. Some actually flew up the leg of my pants from the kick and onto my bare feet. I dropped everything and screamed as loud as I've ever screamed before. I went into the driveway to dry heave, shake out my shorts, and I even started crying a bit. I have an incredible fear of maggots, and this experience had made it 10 times as horrible to me. My dad and stepmom got home from a movie as I was having my little meltdown in the driveway. He asked what was wrong, and I told him. He went to go see for himself. I heard a scream, and he ran back to the garage. I went inside to cool down a bit. He came back in 15 minutes visibly shaken. I asked him what he ended up doing, and he said, "I just went to the garbage, got all the wasp, ant, spider, and snake-killing chemicals as I could, opened up the garbage with my eyes closed, and unloaded every single can." What had happened was that we had so much meat left over from the catering order, chicken parmesan, Italian sausage, etc., that we had to throw it all away, in the garbage. This was during July in Texas, so the meat had been rotting in the dry 103-degree heat for an entire day or two. Hey, just so people are aware, if you ever end up with that much food left over, call up your nearest shelter of any kind and ask them if you can donate it. No wasted food, no maggots. Finally, an exterminator story. Walked into a house for a roach startup. The walls moved. They were in the dressers, beds, closets, furniture, not to mention common areas like the kitchen and baths. Heck, they were in the walls. The place was an old, run-down, 5,000 plus square feet nightmare that I had to clear out single-handedly. 3 months of weekly 2-hour services, and I got things under control. Then the rat problem started. I wasn't too heartbroken when the service was canceled for non-payment. Went to an old woman's trailer for a routine pest control job. Spray the outside, put some granular down, simple stuff. Then she comes out of the house and exclaims she has roaches. Never been to the house before, was just covering for a coworker. So I go in and immediately I smell German roach infestation. So I look around and see all of these glue boards with 50 to 100 roaches on them. Pull out the fridge, and there has to be at least 300 on the walls. I turn and look at this old lady and say, "Ma'am, how long have you had these?" She told me she has had them for 3 years, so I go around looking for the rest of the house, and I'll list a few things I found. A back porch filled with cat food and cat poop. Very heavy termite damage in her roof. I ask her how long she's had the termites, and she responds, "Since I moved in." And I ask her, "How long ago did you move in?" She replies, 22 years ago. The house is a death trap. And a family of possums living in the corner of the house. I told her we need to fumigate the house. It will kill the roaches and termites in one go, and she told me she is treating the termites herself with some crap she bought at Walmart. I told her I will come back to treat the house with my manager. Flash forward a week, and me and my manager spent 2 hours at the place, spraying and getting every crack and crevice we can. I'm still treating that house, and it's been 5 months. On a side note, the old lady obviously had dementia. She would go, "Oh," whenever I would tell her about basic hygienic living. I'm going back again next week, and if she hasn't changed, I'm ending her service with us, and she can live in that house and rot. Edit, I'll make an anonymous tip for the lady.
Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency, I had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SIWORA, which stands for spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week. No improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." The guard left him alone for 2 minutes. The patient was last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I've never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. Yeah, this guy had a plan and he was seeing it through to the end. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out, threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. You truly are a miracle worker, Doc. Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests and didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed, and walks out without a word. So we're not even going to acknowledge the fact that you just completely lied? Not a doctor, but I worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis, she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into doing an exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course, nothing was found. One day, I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage, trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything. As long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time, she fluttered her eyes after making sure I was looking and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and her saying how he's severely disabled, I knew she basically screwed up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled, and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. No, I don't blame you. It sounds like you paid your dues with this woman for a while. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. A young woman, maybe around 18 to 20 years old, went running into a small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ kilometers over the speed limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into the ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed orders set to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents or family before I booted her. Except BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasounds came back showing extremely early ectopic. The officer figures out something's up when he hears an air ambulance call come in over the radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. She's incredibly lucky she ran away from the police. You don't get to say that often. Pediatric neuropsychologist here. Got a referral for more or less consolidation care. Patient was 13, wheelchair bound, required therapeutic oxygen, seizures, arthritis, musculoskeletal problems, suspected autism, completely nonverbal, severe behavior challenges, the list goes on. He was being followed by at least 8 different specialities. clearly none of whom were communicating with each other, and the med list was around 18 prescriptions long, including some incredibly heavy-duty stuff. Opioids, antipsychotics, antiepileptics, that sort of stuff. Got kicked to me after his upteenth ER trip because the ER doctor felt something was off, and he needed someone to look at the whole picture. Factitious disorder by caregiver or Munchausen by proxy. All of the original symptoms were parent-reported, going back to about a year old. It possibly started with a fever-induced seizure in infancy, but this was never witnessed by anyone but mom. She's been telling docs different things. She was convinced her son had all these disorders, told him he was gonna die any day. He got a Make-A-Wish trip, donations, all kinds of things. He was removed from her custody and taken off most of his meds. Within a few weeks, he was out of the wheelchair playing basketball, no oxygen, super talkative and friendly, and no behavior problems. He did have a pretty significant intellectual disability, but there's no way to say if that was organic or the result of the prescription cocktail he had been fed all his life. Hopefully, with some good therapy and a stable home, he can continue to make progress. Some parents just really know how to mess up their kids. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot, wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk, hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. I guess she was just there for painkillers or something? Whenever we had kids, usually teenagers, playing up their symptoms to extend their hospital stay, we would order them into a healthy lifestyle. Lights out at 9, no screen time for 2 hours before bed, healthy diet chock full of fruits and vegetables, screen time limits, minimum number of laps around the unit per day to get in their exercise. They got better so much faster with our healthy lifestyle tips. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego because the hospital's in Oswego by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw him step into a side hallway, take a pencil, and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. Oh, this one really bothers me. This isn't faking. This dude has an addiction and apparently will do whatever it takes to get his pain meds. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs, gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they're of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they're disappointed in the institution, and blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later.
"I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're gonna send me home before they even have the chance to see me?"
My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously, the patient is able to walk with zero assistance, when they had so much difficulty walking with assistance over the past 2 days. At that point, they were enraged we went in the room without knocking. They were discharged home after having a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back in her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep his eyes rolled back into his head, the whole 9 yards. He said he's a famous YouTube rapper that's now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard him before, and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Come on, man, you're gonna fall for that? One time my roommate, who's an ICU nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game, a player on the other team went down hurt and started screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle, before he eventually was helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game, my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. How did no one else notice this? Only the nurse caught on to the fact that the guy's limping on the foot that he hurt? Was told this one by a fellow nurse I used to work with when we had a psych floor. It's not unusual for psych patients to stash things in various orifices. This one woman was convinced she was impregnated by a ghost-like figure, but no one would believe her. So one day, she started complaining of massive pelvic and uterine pain. She called them contractions. So the doctor goes to do an exam. The doctor feels something larger in there, so they prep a table to get the object out, which was quite large. So the wonderful third year helping with the procedure starts hearing this woman complain of contractions and yelling things like, "Should I push? I'm gonna start pushing!" The doctor is trying to work forceps around this woman's parts as to not hurt her. Finally goes, "Got," and as he starts saying it, pulls out a baby doll, head only. The poor med student did the wobble, went all flush and had problems keeping balance and about took a dive. I was told he didn't live that down the whole rotation. I mean, I don't blame the poor kid. In his mind, he just saw a baby's head get ripped off. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years, used a wheelchair, and never walked. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all his extremities. Family and friends were just going along with it, not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it. All the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleeding whatsoever. On occasion, during spectrum examinations, we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding. I walked into her room and found her jabbing her private area with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She'd been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave? Because she had 5 noisy children at home, she needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to the hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it any time her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a prenatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives, as she was putting herself and the baby at risk of serious harm. I understand needing to get away from the kids for a little bit, but this is an extreme. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. I go to check their eye pressure with the Tono pen, a device you poke them directly in the eye with, and they go, "What the heck is that thing?" I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examinations and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which Doc does and asks how he injured it. The guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. Really, says the doc. How long have you been playing for them? Guy's been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on the insurance form. The doc lost it in the staff room laughing. Next week, the patient loses his mind in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. You kinda brought this one on yourself, my friend. Back when I was a nurse, a guy came into the ER for a stomachache. When asking him about history, he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later, when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I'm guessing he was intending to frame her. I didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. This has gotta be one of the stupidest plans I've ever heard. I'm a nurse, not a doctor. I had a patient who worked in a hospital as a janitor, so he knew enough to fake a bit. He was seeking pain meds, complaining of chest pain and wanting morphine. He was worked up for everything cardiac and was fine. Then he tried to claim GI discomfort when he was being discharged. Cleared again for everything. So he faked chest pain again. Cleared again. Now he's my patient. I'm a new face. He tells me he's having abdominal pain. I call the doctor, knowing this guy's history. He says he'll be up to see him soon. This patient wants a ginger ale, some stomachache. I decided to go to lunch. My coworker comes into the lunchroom disgusted. This guy had taken a dump in a basin and then dumped the ginger ale over it and tried to tell her he had fecal vomiting. He obviously needed meds right now for the pain. I walk into his room and sure enough, a pile of poop in a puddle of ginger ale. I told him I'd have to take away his food and drinks and we'd have to put an NG down. Suddenly, he changed his tune. He admitted to faking it. Why do these people do what they do? ER nurse here. I was bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked this foolish man back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. When I was a medical student, I worked in the pediatric side of the emergency room, and we would give popsicles to all the kids. One afternoon, an 8-year-old came in with his father, and I asked what was wrong. The kid couldn't remember what he had complained about to his dad, and the dad couldn't remember why he brought his kid in. The kid's mom was a nurse, and she worked at another hospital at the time, but she was the one that would keep track of all these things. Anyway, after a few minutes trying to figure out what was going on, the kid asked, "So can I have my popsicle now?" The kid was 100% healthy. Unfortunately, we reinforced bad behavior and both the kid and the dad subsequently left with popsicles. Years ago, I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual I'm crippled paraphernalia. Crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, all of it. And she could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a backstreets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove around her neighborhood because, wonders behold, she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I didn't call her out. Next week, she was back at the clinic with her I'm crippled get up on again. A few weeks later, I got a subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I'm a surgery resident. When I was on my trauma rotation, we had a patient come in after MVC with question that maybe the patient had seized and that had caused the accident. So he's in the trauma bay and starts shaking. The trauma nurse goes, "Oh, this isn't a real seizure." And the patient stops shaking, sits up, turns to the nurse and yells, "You don't know a thing about me." Prisoner came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time, the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed, and then give TPA, a powerful clot-busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course, he got a little carried away, and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis. And that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. Can't say I blame him. At least he wasn't trying to escape. He just wanted to get out for a day, it sounds like.
What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? Here before the comments are filled with, that's not real, that didn't happen. I'm just reading what's on the thread, man. Cut me some slack. I was once mugged by 4 guys on one of the main shopping streets of Nairobi, Kenya. One of the guys had me in a chokehold, and just before I was about to pass out, they dropped me and ran. At the time, I didn't know why. 12 months later, sitting on a beach on an island in Thailand, I meet a British couple who did business in Kenya, and we start to talk about how dangerous it was getting for foreigners. They described an incident the year before of turning a corner and seeing a white guy being mugged and a shopkeeper who rescued him by hitting one of them over the head with a bat. They were in the street on the same day at the exact same time I was there. It was me who they witnessed being mugged. What are the odds of randomly meeting up on a beach in Thailand a year later? I live in Australia, and I have for almost my whole life, but I was born in Dubai. Every weekend in Dubai, my mom would take me to the Hilton Beach Club and sit me in front of the pastry chef and eat. We moved away from Dubai really early on, so I don't even remember much. Fast forward to 17 years of age, a new kid at school had just moved from a nearby town. We became friends, and we both loved cricket, and we practiced a lot together. My dad and I were giving him a lift home after we were practicing, and Dad asks, "Where were you born?" And he says, "Dubai." And the conversation continues, and I say I was too, etc. Then he says, "My parents used to be the pastry chefs at the Hilton Beach Club." And this blew me away. Here we were, 16 years later, halfway across the world, and every weekend I sat in front of his parents and ate what they made for me. To this day, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, what are the chances? A few years ago, I got into a cab heading out for the evening in downtown Toronto. Shortly after being dropped off, I realized I left my phone in the cab. I tried calling it with no luck. I called the cab company, but because I had flagged the cab and paid cash, they had no real way of knowing which cab I was in. I figured the phone was as good as done and went about my night. Many hours later, and having moved around the city quite a bit, I am ready to call it a night. So, flag another cab. Sitting in the back seat, I start to think the driver looks familiar and realize that I'm in the same cab I took earlier. He hasn't found a phone, but I start looking anyways, and sure enough, there it is, jammed in the seat. Me and my flip phone were happily reunited, only for me to put it in a washing machine 2 days later. Wop, 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 wop. I have a similar story. I was going to a My Chemical Romance and Blink-182 concert back in college. I went with a couple of friends, and we got a hotel nearby Jiffy Lube Live in order to get plastered. I got some Wendy's on the way to the concert to eat in the parking lot beforehand, but left it in the taxi. I was drunkenly devastated. After the concert, we hail a cab and I get in, feel a brown paper bag at my feet, and look down. That beautiful ginger on the bag was smiling up at my inebriated eyes as if to say, "I knew you'd come back." An American friend of mine by the name of Tom took his family on vacation to check out Antarctica. He met an Australian guy named Paul on Christmas Day in Antarctica. They didn't exchange contact info. A year later, Christmas Day, they take their vacation to Machu Picchu. He's looking down at a map when he hears, "Hey Tom, how the heck are ya?" It was Paul, taking his family on their annual trip as well. Never could explain this payphone incident. Saturday night out with friends. We decided to call my friend Al to see if he wants to join us. This was in England long before mobile phones, so we had to use one of the iconic red phone booths. Someone was already using it, so we had to wait a few minutes. Guy leaves and we cram in the booth. Now, in those days, in order to make a call, you would first get a dial tone, then call the number. When the person answered, you would hear a bunch of beeps, at which point you insert the coins. So I pick up the phone, but hear no dial tone. I hang the phone up and try again. Still no dial tone. Seems to be still connected to the previous call. I say hello to see if anyone is still on the line. Person answers, "Hello?" It was my friend Al. He had just picked up his phone to make a call, and somehow, miraculously, without even dialing his number, we were connected. We all went to the pub after and tried to figure out how the heck this happened, but it remains a mystery. If I did not have my friends with me at the time as witnesses, I would have believed it was my mind playing tricks on me. In 2004, I was 18 and on a 3-week tour of Europe. I was at the Louvre and had just experienced the cluster that was the Mona Lisa exhibit. After looking at it for 2 minutes, I started to wander around aimlessly. As I was walking, an older couple asked if I knew how to get to the Mona Lisa exhibit. I told them yes, and because I'm horrible with directions, I'd be happy to walk them there myself. They were really nice and very appreciative that I was taking the time to help them. They asked me where I was from, US in Nashville, but I mentioned my parents were immigrants from Italy. They told me they were from Portugal on anniversary. We talked a bit more, told them my name, and they were really excited about it since I shared the same name as their grandchild. Anyways, we get to the exhibit, and I go to part ways and shake their hands, but get pulled in for 2 massive hugs and a kiss on the cheek. They give me their address and say anytime I'm in Portugal to stop by and I'll have a place to stay and eat. We take a group photo and leave. 7 years later, I'm in Munich for Oktoberfest. I'm standing outside my hotel waiting for my friends when an older couple asks if I know how to get to the fairgrounds. Again, I'm crap with directions, so since I'm headed there, I tell them they could just follow me and my friends. Again, we start talking about where we all are from. Now, I have a memory like an elephant, and once they mention they're from Portugal, I start to think maybe these are the same people. I ask them if they have grandkids, and they say they have 6. I ask if one of their names is History of a Man. They look at each other sort of surprised and say yes. They ask, how do I know that? And tell them that I had met them 7 years prior in Paris at the Louvre. The old lady gets really happy and starts crying and starts to hug me. They say they remember me now and asked why I never came to visit, that they had our picture in a frame on their wall and always wondered what happened to the nice American boy. We spent the next 3 hours drinking beers and catching up. Luckily, we got there early, so we were able to get an empty table, and they bought all the beers the entire time. This time, they demanded I give them my email so we could keep in contact. I even added their son on Facebook. 2 years later, I go and visit for the summer, and sure enough, there on the wall amongst the rest of their family pictures is 18-year-old me standing between them. I'll tell you all something. I'm a bit of an introvert and can be awkward when meeting new people, simply because I like to get a feel for who they are and where their boundaries are. But never in my life, other than with my own family, and maybe not even then, have I ever felt more at home and that I belonged than the 3 weeks I spent with them. We still talk weekly. It's like having a second family. In high school, my friends set me up with their boyfriend's cousin. Let's call him Jack. Jack and I were walking around an amusement park and started talking about recent family spring break vacations. Turns out, both Jack and I had been in Las Vegas during the same week. We stayed at the same hotel. The conversation changed subjects when Jack stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, "I saw you in Las Vegas." I thought he was full of crap. There's no way he would remember some random girl among the thousands of people there. He told me the exact place he saw me and that my sister and I were posing for a photo. We got back to my house and found the picture. There were Jack and his brother in the background. When I was in grade 2, our family moved from Manitoba to Arizona for a year due to a contract my dad was working. We rented out the house fully furnished for the year. While in Arizona, we flew to Alberta one weekend. On the flight from Arizona to Alberta, I sat beside a boy my age and we started talking. It went something like this. Me, what city are you from? Him, Winnipeg. Me too. What school do you go to? School name. Cool, I used to go there too. What street do you live on? Street name. I lived on that street. It turns out his family was renting our house while we were gone, so I was sitting beside the boy who was sleeping in my bed while we were in Arizona. When I was 13, I was on a family holiday in Venice. We were on a gondola touring the waterways of the city. We got halfway down a long passageway, and another gondola passes us by, carrying a man and a woman. The man and my dad lock eyes, exclaim one another's name, and have a quick handshake as our gondolas pass. Myself, brother, and mother sit quietly, pretty stunned, while the woman on the other boat explodes with, "What? Who's that? How do you know him?" We floated off in the other direction, comparatively swag and chill. Turns out it was a guy my dad went to university with and hadn't seen him since. They haven't even contacted one another since. It's crazy they recognized one another, considering they were both in their late 40s now, passing fleetingly on 2 gondolas in Venice. About 10 years ago, I tried to get into Six Flags with a tiny keychain Swiss Army knife. It literally had a dull 1-inch blade. They told me I could either throw it away, take it to my car a mile away, or rent a locker for like $10. So I decided to hide it in the planter. I looked down and saw a big piece of bark laying in the dirt and figured it would be a good hiding place. I picked it up and found another mini Swiss Army knife. I placed mine next to the first and went into the park. When I returned, the other knife was gone and a smiley face was etched into the dirt in its place. I went to a concert in Dallas and took 2 lawn chairs. They wouldn't let me bring them in, so being 6'5", I threw them on top of a very tall bush. No one would have even seen them, and hardly anyone will be able to reach them. As I'm pulling them down after the concert, I pulled down 4 of the exact same chair. I only brought 2 though. Up walks a guy who is as tall as I am, wearing the exact same Blink-182 tour shirt from 2009, and the other 2 chairs were his. It was pretty wild. We smoked a doob, did a tall guy high five, then parted ways. My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7 or 8. We stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there, and one day we all started playing tag. I was it and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken 1 bone, and it was my arm when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it. Now is as great a time as any to recommend the movie Tag starring Jeremy Renner. It's really funny, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's based off of a true story of these guys who had a tag gang going for like 30 years. And there are so many different crazy ways they all tagged each other. And it's got a surprisingly emotional message. One time I parked, without even noticing, next to a car with the same license plate as me. I had a Massachusetts plate, she had a New Hampshire plate, both with the same 5-digit number. The weirder thing was that both of us had kept the plate as a novelty plate because the state wasn't making 5-digit plate numbers anymore, but a family member wanted to keep it. In my case, my dad wanted to keep his dad's plate. My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment and had a few days to myself. After orientation, I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade until his family moved. When I was in high school, I was aimlessly playing around our library one day. Like any large public high school, our library had literally thousands of books quietly tucked away in shelves and rarely, if ever, touched. That day, I pulled a book at random from a shelf in the back and sat down to read it. After opening it, a slip of paper fell out, and I quickly recognized the dashed 10 digits written on it as a phone number. I hastily read the number, and it was my older sister's number, who had graduated my high school years earlier. Someone wrote her number and tucked it away into a random book in the back until I found it years later. My great-grandmother fainted when my mother told her she was getting married to my dad because my great-grandmother had gotten engaged to a guy with the same name as my dad, and both men had been stationed at the same fort. But great-grandmother's fiancé died. Fortunately, mom's fiancé did not. This one's a long one, so strap in. I once went camping with about 5 or so other friends. This was about 3 years ago now in Pisgah National Forest in the mountains of North Carolina. There are some amazing waterfalls in this area, one called Rainbow Falls. It's about 125 feet from river above to ground below. If you keep hiking past Rainbow Falls, there is a much smaller waterfall in the river above Rainbow Falls called Turtleback Falls. It's basically a very slippery rock with water running over it, which ends with about a 4 to 5 foot drop. This is really cool because you can climb up it using a rope someone attached to a tree above, walk out to the middle of the rock, and slide down. There's also another spot that's about a third of the way up the side of Rainbow Falls, where you can climb up some branches, then basically rappel down a rock face, shimmy out on a ledge, and jump about 30 to 40 feet into the nice, deep pool in the river at the bottom of the waterfall. It was when my friends and I had climbed out on the ledge and were about to jump when we noticed that there was another group of people hanging out in the river below us. They started cheering us on and encouraging us to jump, as it is slightly terrifying. Anyways, we ended up jumping, and once in the river below, we talked to the other group of people. They seemed pretty cool. Fast forward 1 year, we had so much fun a year earlier that we decided to go back again. This time, we camped a little further down the river, and we decided to climb on some rocks downriver from the waterfall, about 300 or 400 yards from the waterfall. I was climbing on one rock and found something that looked like a strap of some kind. Assuming it was trash, I didn't touch it, but when I pointed it out to one of my friends, he noticed it was actually a GoPro camera in a waterproof case, so we decided to keep it. Fast forward a couple days, my friend and I purchased a charger for that type of camera and decided to see what was on it. We start watching the video and see some guys climbing up the place where we jumped off the side of the waterfall in front of the cameraman who was also climbing. The cameraman starts to get closer, and we see something that made us instantly start to freak out. On the back left shoulder of the person in front of the cameraman was the exact tattoo that my friend has. When it gets even closer, we realize that the person on camera was my friend who I was currently sitting right beside. Later, the cameraman gets up to the ledge and we see me and the rest of my friends from over a year ago. There are also some pictures and videos of us jumping from the ledge. We watched the rest of the video in a stunned state, and the last 30 minutes or so of footage is of the cameraman going up to the river above Rainbow Falls and sliding on Turtleback Falls, apparently losing his GoPro in the water after going over the falls. The camera sinks to the bottom, and you can even see fish swimming by and staring at the camera. Now, think about where we found the camera 400 to 500 yards downriver from the bottom of the large waterfall. So apparently, this camera made its way downriver over a 125-foot waterfall and got lodged in a rock 500 yards away, and my friends and I found it a year later with video footage of us from the previous year on it. It took us a little while to decide on this as being the most reasonable explanation. Edit. A lot of people are wondering if I knew the cameraman. The answer is no, I did not. I suspect he was one of the people I mentioned being at the bottom of the river while we were about to jump. We jumped off this rock multiple times, so he might have followed us up one of the times, although I don't specifically remember this. As a college sophomore, I went on a trip to France by myself. I was sitting in Notre Dame Cathedral listening to music when a girl I dated in high school sat down near me, totally at random. We were both speechless when we saw one another there, out of the blue, in a foreign country within a vast cathedral. All while Quasimodo looked down sadly, knowing his only love forever out of reach. This coincidence is straight up sorcery. Was kayaking with my family along a river, when I thought I would pull a fast one on my brother. So I yell, "Hey look, a bald eagle!" to my brother so I can do the whole "made you look" game, but to my surprise, he goes, "Cool." At this point, I think he's just messing with me, so I can't say the whole "made you look" thing. So then I look up, and a bald eagle swoops down, catches a fish, and flies to the other side of the river. One of the most magical coincidences ever. I'm an American who moved to Amsterdam some years ago, and my first year there on a random Saturday, I decided to head out for a drink. Sat down next to a cute German guy who was in town for the first time from 6 hours away, helping a friend move kind of thing, and it turns out he's doing a PhD in physics. I'm doing mine in astronomy and have a physics background, so we spent maybe 10 minutes discussing our research topics when he mentions offhand how he used to study in New Zealand. I get a confused look and then get all excited. Johan, Professor W's E&M class in Auckland, first half of 2007. Freaked him out until I explained. I was a semester abroad student in Auckland that year, and not only were we in this same class, we even did homeworks together and such, but lost touch once I left the country, with no one having a clue what happened to the other, only to randomly run into each other 5 years later in a random bar in a random city on another continent. I don't know if I can ever top that one. It was pretty darn cool. I once burped 1 second before a power blackout in my neighborhood. It felt almighty. This happened to me a few months ago, and it was pretty darn improbable. I'm walking through Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the train station that takes you to and from San Francisco and elsewhere, where an average of 375,000 people pass through daily. I walk up the escalator to my train and pass by an envelope lying on the ground. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I took a couple steps back to pick it up anyways. The next part freaked me out. I looked at the address, and it was addressed to me. I instantly look around to see if it was a practical joke or if I'm about to get assassinated or something. neither of those were the case. The sender was a family friend. We'll call them the Johnsons. I knew that Mr. Johnson took the BART daily, but I had never personally ran into him. After work, I call him up and ask him about the letter. Turns out, he had about 300 letters with him on the BART and was going to send them out for his daughter's graduation party. What in the world were the chances of him dropping the one letter addressed to me out of the 300, combined with the chances of me being the one out of 375,000 people to pick it up? Pretty wild. I met my now husband at work. Turns out there are enough coincidences that my mom is seriously wondering whether we are distantly related. We were born in the same hospital 2 weeks apart. We then both moved about 500 miles away and ended up in the same university together. We moved from there another 100 miles away and worked in the same company. We both have relatives in the same area in Dublin. We both have a relative that worked in the same hotel in Dublin at about the same time back in the 1930s. My mom and his grandmother have the exact same combination of unusual first and middle names, and I have the same birthday as his mom. We don't live in Ireland. Edit, when I say birthday, I mean month and day. I am not old enough to be his mom. Also, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered giving birth. Have you ever correctly had a gut feeling to dislike someone who, on the surface, was a cool person that everybody else liked? What's that story? Content warning. A lot of these are going to involve a lot of inappropriate assault and some underage stuff. So if you're not comfortable with that, probably best to avoid this video. City Council hired another medic. Older dude with long hair, not that that matters. He was new to the scene, recently completing the course. Guy was awesome to hang out with. Went to the bar with the younger EMTs, played video games, etc. At first, I thought he was cool, but as I observed his work, I was his superior and did his probationary eval, I noticed something was off. At the private council meeting, I spoke openly about this in his 30-day review. I stated something was off. He didn't seem like a people person and generally the type that would do this job. They said that I had no grounds to state that he wasn't suited and that he did his job as described. I countered with the fact that when caring for people, being a people person is an unwritten rule, and that doing your job without caring leads to mistakes. And in our job field, a mistake means death. They weren't having it, so I finally said, look, in this job field, you need to learn to read people, and I'm telling you that something isn't right here. City Council told me that basically I was jealous because he got along with the EMTs. Honestly, I could care less. I'm not in this job for them. Fast forward a month, and I get a call from an ER about an hour from us. They said that their report said the patient was administered 80 milligrams of drug X. The patient denied receiving it, and since they couldn't figure out why the heck the medic would have even given it, they ran a tox panel on him which showed that he did not receive it. The doc told me normally he'd let it slide as an error and asked me to speak to him about accuracy, but he felt something was off. I thanked him, and after hanging up, pulled the trip sheets. Right in the run report, it has the drug, the amount given, and the time. I pulled up the narcotics log. It showed drug given and replenished along with the tag numbers. Next, I called a friend of mine who was a local cop and was off duty at the time. He came over and I opened the other medic's narc box. Sure enough, it had been opened and replaced. We then went through his logs for the past 2 months he had been working and located at least 12 times drugs had been given when probably not needed. I called the ER doc back and explained to him, and his exact quote, "Here's my personal phone number and our lawyer's number. I'll fax you over a written statement along with the test results. I'll see if we have anything on other patients he brought in." My buddy then called dispatch to tell the council members there was an emergency at the station and they need to come in. When they got there, we showed them all the evidence and what we suspected. Within 15 minutes, we not only had the DA approval, but also a judge sign an arrest warrant. Turns out the dude admitted to having a 20-year painkiller addiction. He ran out of sources, so he figured being a medic would give him easy access. He even told the judge he was worried that he would have killed someone just for the meds. At the trial, I was asked for what resolution I wanted. I told the judge, being a paramedic, I've seen how drugs change a person and that I don't hold him fully responsible. On my recommendation, he got 3 months in a locked drug rehab facility, followed by 6 months of house arrest. 4 years later, the dude is clean and runs a fundraiser to help raise money for the END to provide anonymous Narcan services and drug awareness programs. Today, this guy will be an honored member of my crew. Addiction literally changes people. The end result is I now am solely responsible for hiring the medics, reviewing, and dismissal. I no longer need to justify to counsel why someone was dismissed. This job is one where a gut feeling decides someone's fate. Sometimes our gut instincts are only sort of right. When I was in 7th grade, there was this girl who was really quiet and sort of creepy, and she smelled like crap, literally. She wore these odd dresses that looked like pioneer dresses, homemade, and she was just, well, creepy. No one talked to her. People tried to avoid sitting next to her. We all gossiped about her as being the epitome of creepiness. Then one day, she was gone. Didn't come to class. The next day, it was all over the news. The police had arrested these horrifically abusive parents who were neglecting and abusing their daughter and who had kept their younger son locked in a cage his entire life and never fed him. The younger boy was kept alive by, you guessed it, his older sister. The police were led to the house by neighbors' complaints about the stench. So this poor, smelly girl was suffering abuse from her parents, and all the while sneaking food and water to her little brother, who was literally locked in a cage for years upon years, keeping him alive, and then coming to school where she would be avoided and mocked behind her back and sometimes humiliated. She was a weirdo, and our guts all told us there was something wrong there. But she was a freaking hero. Never heard what happened to her after the parents were arrested. Hope she recovered. I never trusted my ex-BF's uncle. I just knew he was trouble and had issues with him visiting or my ex visiting him. He was arrested in Florida last year for production and selling meth and hosting a prostitution ring out of his home. Later learned the ex partook in all the activities at his uncle's home. Apparently my gut was right about the uncle, but not about my ex. My snake did. I had the sweetest, chillest ball python who never nipped or hissed or reared up or anything. She'd just curl up with you and hang out. One day, a friend brought over some of his friends, and all of a sudden, my snake went nuts, standing straight up in her tank and hissing at one of the guys. A couple of weeks later, that dude robbed my house while I was out of town. R.I.P. Guinevere, a good snake. Interviewing a guy for a job. Something doesn't feel right, but my interviewing partner really seemed to like him. We get to his portfolio of work, and I see my side project that I worked on alone as one of his websites. So I start asking him questions about it, what challenges he had, how the client was, etc. I let him go on and on. Then I say, I have to level with you. This is my work. You are showing me my own work. Look at the source near the footer. It has my website in the comments. He went ghost white, and I just sat there. After that, I coached him a little on how not to suck, and he left. We called the contract agency that sent him and let them know. My sister's first husband. I was 5 when they got married, and I only actually met him a few times in person because they lived on the other side of the country. My family really loved him. He was charming, athletic, smart, handsome, financially secure, and seemed like a great dad when they had kids. Plus, he was never anything but nice to me. But I always sensed something shady about the guy. When I was in the 5th grade, I remember getting in huge trouble for a class assignment, an essay describing our families, in which I described him as a bad person, pretty much word for word, quote, "There's something I just don't like about him." It was one of the only times I got spanked as a child. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and my parents discovered that he'd been abusive to my sister and the kids almost the whole time. They ended up divorcing, and he has proven to be a complete sociopath ever since. He hadn't paid a dime in child support, despite being well off enough to buy a new luxury sports car every few years, and uses their 2 kids, who are now teenagers who know he's full of crap, to play mind games with my sister, bringing her to court for full custody, knowing he won't win due to his past, just to cause her inconvenience and rack up legal fees for her, just as an example. He also has refused to let the kids fly out to visit our side of the family a few times for no reason whatsoever. He's a jerkwad, a narcissist, a complete sociopath, and somehow, 10-year-old me was able to sense it before anyone else in the family. My mom brought her new boyfriend over the house one time for me to meet him. He weirded me out. I can't tell you why, but I didn't like him. Maybe it's because he was a 35-year-old man who wore visors. Friendly and funny guy who my family liked. A year into their relationship, he beat the crap out of my mom and stole her dog. Probably the closest I've come to an assassination attempt. Edit 1. I didn't go after him as not to implicate my mom. Also, we got our dog back. Edit 2. Yep, he's in jail. My childhood best friend's mother's boyfriend. He creeped me out and I hated being over at her house when he was there. Her family went on a ski trip with mine, and my parents both thought he was great, funny, charming, etc. They didn't understand why I didn't like him. Years later, My best friend told me that he inappropriately abused her starting when she was about 9. I probably was picking up on her fear of him. So my husband has this cousin, Jason, and he loathes them, always has since he was a small child. There are stories about my husband trying to beat Jason when he was 5. It was so bad that as an adult, my husband refused to attend any family gatherings that Jason would be, out of the fear that he would beat the living crap out of him. Nobody could ever figure out why my husband hated his cousin so much. He had never done anything to him, and my husband is the most laid-back and friendly person I've ever met. He genuinely likes everyone, except for this guy. I never understood it myself, never having met Jason, and anytime I would ask my husband about it, he would always say, "I freaking hate that kid. He's not right." Jason was pretty well liked throughout the family, so my husband's position caused him to catch a lot of crap from other family members. I finally got to meet Jason a few years ago at my brother-in-law's wedding, and I saw right off what my husband was talking about. To the casual observer, there was nothing tangible that Jason did that he could put your finger on, but something was off. He would laugh and smile, but the smile didn't go all the way to his eyes. His eyes were just flat and empty. Unless he was looking at the girls at the wedding. And when I say girls, I mean children under 10. When he looked at those girls, his eyes lit up with this sick little light. You know how someone who hasn't eaten in a long time looks when they finally get a meal they love set in front of them? That's how Jason's eyes looked when he looked at those little girls, like he was hungry and they were his meal. About 2 years ago, Jason's dad married a woman with 2 young daughters. Jason went off and volunteered to babysit. About a year ago, Jason was arrested and convicted of forcing himself on both of those little girls multiple times. Screw you, Jason. I wish my husband had beat you, you creepy son of a gun. When I played high school football, we had an equipment manager who had been doing the job for decades and was absolutely adored by the community. Guy was in his 70s or 80s. One day, I'm ready for a game early, so I head out to the bus that's taking us. I see him loading stuff up, so I offer to help him load a few things. Once we're all loaded on the bus, he walks to me in the back, because I was a cool kid, and hands me a Hostess cupcake in front of everyone as a thank you. He handed me the cupcake, looked me in the eye, and this sense of dread just falls on me. I have no idea why, and everyone's looking at me, so I act normal. I eat the cupcake, because I was, and still am, fat and will eat any cupcake you hand me, and just kind of write off the feeling. That summer, he was arrested for inappropriately assaulting some 15-year-old girl. I'm pretty sure they thought he did more, but couldn't prove it or something. While in the Army, we moved into a new house in upstate New York. We were being neighborly and talked to a guy across the street. He had 5 kids, no wife. He also had multiple neighborhood kids playing in the yard. He told us we can always send ours over. He gave us both this horrible feeling, so we smiled and got out. About a year later, my wife told me, I was in Kandahar, that his kids were taken from him. He had been touching them at least ever since his wife died. About 15 years ago, I worked in a small office, mostly men, all who I really liked. A new guy started one day, and instantly I had a bad feeling about him. I don't even know exactly why I felt that way, and all the other people seemed fine with him, so I did my best to be polite and find things to talk to him about. I was in my mid-30s. He was about the same or a little older, and we both had young sons, so I was able to find some common ground. Apparently he and his wife didn't live together. She might have been back in his home country, but I could never shake that bad feeling. A year or so later, I had left the company to have my second son, and a friend who had taken my place there called me one morning and said, "Did you read the paper today?" That man had been arrested in another state, apparently having been set up by an FBI sting online, where he had been chatting with who he thought was a 13-year-old girl and was meeting up with her. In the trunk of his car, they found a video camera and rope. I worked as a CNA in a nursing home during/right after high school. We got a new guy that made a lot of mistakes and obviously had some cognitive impairments. I'm not sure what was wrong exactly, but it was obvious that he was mentally slow. Leaving a patient with the feeding tube laying flat, increasing their chance of aspirating food into their lungs, for example. On several occasions, I complained about him to our supervisor and also vented to my coworkers that I just did not feel right about him. Everyone accused me of not having any compassion. They said he was slow, but that he would get it and I should be more understanding. They all thought that I was being judgmental because of his disability, but it felt like more than that to me. One night, another CNA went to answer a call light and walked in on him forcing himself on an elderly bedridden woman. He didn't even stop, just held eye contact with the coworker until he was finished. This all happened over 15 years ago. He went to jail obviously, but I saw him in Walmart last summer, so he is out now. I sure hope he is never able to work in a position to take advantage of vulnerable people ever again. Yes, but I suppressed it so quickly and fast because I felt like it was horribly ungracious since she was being so friendly. Over the next couple years, she became my closest friend in the new town I had moved to. Then the following couple years, it vacillated between being close but just feeling like she really didn't want me around or was messing with me a little bit. Turns out she was having an affair with my husband and was literally intentionally driving me crazy. There was a man that would walk around my neighborhood with samurai swords on his back. He also had a golden retriever that would follow him everywhere. As children, we were always intrigued by the swords and obviously wanted to pet his dog as well. He would never let us and yelled at us if we got too close. I'm at Chevron getting some gas and 20 cop cars surround a man by the dumpster. Turns out, this guy had just killed a woman in the woods of North Carolina, chopped her into pieces, presumably with the samurai swords, and was dumping the bloody clothes in said dumpster. His name was Gary Michael Hilton, and he's presumed to be the killer involved with numerous other backwoods murders throughout the Southeast. This one's going to be a long story, and is going to involve a lot of non-consensual content, but it will be the last story. My stepfather. He's my mom's third husband. Mom met him at a bar, a country bar she used to go dancing at, and saw him there for a while before deciding to introduce him to her kids. He took us all out to dinner that night, and we had a relatively good time. Then we all went back to the house. We weren't home long before I heard him and my mom giggling in the hallway, and suddenly I just felt sick. I was about 12 at the time, by the way. I'm not sure what it was, but suddenly I just hated this guy. My mom asked what was wrong, and I just said I didn't feel good and went to my room. Imagine the surprise of all of us kids when we woke up to see that this guy was still there. He moved in that very night. I tried to make the best of a bad situation, though I avoided him for some time. No more than a week later, he offers to brush my hair for me. We're all in the living room watching TV. I'm hesitant at first, but my mom encourages me. Apparently he had sisters and knew how to brush girls' hair. I kept my hair about waist length back then, and it was a pain to get the knots out, so I caved and let him brush my hair. He just brushed it, no big deal. So when he offered other times, I let him. Then one day, he offered while no one was there. Because my hair was so long, why don't I sit up on the edge of the chair in front of him? Oh, hey, would you like a back rub? I rub your mom's back all the time. I should mention this wasn't my first interaction with the perv, and I actually was very bothered just by being that close to someone. I hated being touched back then, but because everyone obviously liked this guy, I told myself I shouldn't cause any problems. Next thing I know, he says, "Can I rub down a little further? In front? It's your decision. You're completely in charge here." Thank God I had the courage to say no. I avoided him for ages after that and didn't have the sense to tell my mom or my brothers. This guy proceeds to find ways to get both of my older brothers out of the house by the time I'm 15. He goes long periods of time, seeming to be a perfectly good guy, and then out of nowhere hits me with something pervy and horrid. Sophomore year comes up and we get our class rings. Well, these rings are not cheap, and we've always been fairly poor. My mom says I have to ask Jerk, name changed, not so obviously, for the money. I ask him to buy my class ring, and he says, "What's in it for me?" I go silent. My mom is right there. She innocently says, "She can bake you a cake." I'm good at baking. He's quiet for a while and has to think it through. Then he says, "Okay, but there are rules." I forget what all the rules were, stupid stuff mostly. But his final rule was, if you lose this ring, you get naked. What? This is an expensive ring. It's a lot of money, so you better not lose it or you get naked for me. My mom tells him to stop, but only half-heartedly. When I try to talk to her about it later, she says, "Well, I guess you better not lose it." At that point, I kind of figured I couldn't count on my mom for help. Over the years, I've learned she was messed with a lot when she was younger and has convinced herself that all men are this way. I love my mom to death, but it kills me that she believes this. He's never stopped being a total jerk. I lived with them until I was 20. I was very shy, and having a job was very hard for me. I tried moving in with my oldest brother to help him take care of his kid, but after 3 months I was asking to come home and once again got the "what's in it for me" response. I got to hear all about how he'd lived the past few years just for me and mom, bought us a house and everything, and how ungrateful I was. I came back to what was essentially a prison. I had my nephew with me at first, as my brother was going to give my mom custody of him. That is, until my stepdad got mad at him and kicked him hard. A 3-year-old little boy who hadn't done anything more than annoy him, probably by making noise. So mom calls up my brother and tells him to come get him because she's afraid to have him around my stepfather. Then, once he's gone, she convinces herself that he never did that. Finally, I met my first boyfriend. By this time, I'm 20. I had gotten 2 part-time jobs and he worked at one of them. I was hanging out at his house a lot and my stepdad got jealous. He decided to give me a curfew of midnight and said if I break it, then I'm out of the house and can't ever come back unless I sleep with him because he knows I can't be a virgin anymore. I was, so there was no excuse now. I cried to my boyfriend, and he told me I could come live with him. This was after we'd only been seeing each other for about 3 weeks. That night, I didn't go home. My stepfather called me and screamed, called me stupid, and I screamed back and told him how he'd made my life a living hell. An hour later, he and mom pull up with his truck full of all my stuff that he could put in it. He took my car because it was mom's and dumped my stuff right there, telling my boyfriend I was his problem now. I will never forget the smirk on my mom's face when she hugged me and I apologized for everything. She said she wasn't mad at me at all, but was proud. Apparently, I'd had the guts to do what she couldn't. Of course, not long after I left, he finally proposed to her and they got married. It's screwed up to realize that the reason your stepfather didn't marry your mom is because he wanted a shot at you first. Anyway, this is way longer than I meant it to be, but the point is that everyone who meets this jerk loves him. They don't know who he is, just that he's personable and relatively smart. But I never forget that first night when for no apparent reason, I just felt sick at the thought of him. Edit. There was an update post somewhere in the comments. It was too long for me to post here, so I just did it as a reply. The TLDR is, no, I'm not with that boyfriend anymore, but we were together 7 years. Yes, mom is still with this jerk, but I never see him. She's afraid to leave him, but now that it's just the 2 of them, she sees it as her being the only one who has to tolerate his crap, and she's willing to do that for what she sees as financial security. She visits by herself, and no one questions why we don't go visiting there.
Massage therapists of Reddit, what are some of your most awkward or disgusting experiences with clients? Tell me all the weird crap you've dealt with. Then tell me if it's worth it making this career choice. My mother's been a massage therapist for over 20 years. She's in her 50s and she loves it. She massages a lot of elderly people and doesn't mind. She massages a few obese people and doesn't mind. To her, people are people, and she's not easily disgusted. But when people proposition her for sex, she minds. One particularly troubling encounter was when she was massaging a friend's husband and he thought it would be appropriate to ask for sexual favors. I hope she went and told her friend about that afterwards, cause I'm sure she'd want to know. I had a very eccentric client, which is a nice way of saying creepy. They came into our clinic one day wanting a tui na massage. It's a type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the client strip down into their underwear before we commence. But with this guy, I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him a towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, gray hair, gold earring, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as an erotic masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and genitals all over before screwing the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how he was good at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. It was a very awkward session. Yeah, not the kind of job offer you want while working. I was getting a massage last week, and in the little room next to mine, there was a talkative older gentleman. He was chatting away to his massage therapist. Then it went quiet. After a little while, I heard him whisper, Do you do this for everyone? A large female client wanted focus on her glutes. Needless to say, I was farted on while she was asleep. Her own fart woke her up, and then she accused me of farting because there were trace amounts of fart still in the air. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant at the time, but now you have a funny story to tell. I've had clients ask if they could massage me, specifically my butt, while I was working on them. One woman tried to put her face in my crotch and told me she would love to lick me. For the record, I was wearing yoga pants as I'm also a yoga instructor. Many people are surprised at how strong I am and comment on it and how small my hands are. That's not odd. What was odd was the guy who followed that observation with telling me that I also had
moved like a wolverine.
Not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Former massage therapist here. I used to work in the YMCA in my hometown. There was a group of 4 older ladies around their early 50s that all played tennis together, and afterwards took turns getting massaged. At first, it was great. They were mostly doctors' wives, fairly easygoing and generous tippers to boot. But then things took a strange turn. One woman offered me a diamond tennis bracelet if I agreed to switch the order they were massaged in and did her first. I declined the gift but promised to use a rotating schedule in the future. She was fine at first, but slowly became more aggressive. She would beg and bribe me to extend her half hour for 10 or 15 minutes, in spite of her friends waiting. She constantly offered me expensive presents, shopping, home-cooked meals, all kinds of things I was uncomfortable accepting. The more I declined her offers, the weirder and edgier she seemed to get around me. Finally, I guess she got tired of beating around the bush and made an outright advance by grabbing my hand and forcing it onto her breast. I told her I was very flattered, but I wasn't interested in other women this way. She screamed, perfectly in range of all her friends and my coworkers to hear, about how I'd been leading her on for months, and how I didn't deserve any of her time and money. She berated my appearance and education before storming out the door naked and furious. I quit that day, started waiting tables, and never quite worked up the nerve to go back. Sounds like this woman was a little more invested in your relationship than you were. My mom is a massage therapist. She used to work out of our house. She had a studio downstairs where she would have people over for massages. One day, a woman who came over was probably in her late 60s. Oldish, slightly overweight woman. Now, my mom, as is standard procedure, asks this woman to disrobe and get under the covers while my mom waited outside. When she came back in after a few minutes after asking if the woman was done, the woman was standing in the middle of the room completely naked. The woman said, "Honey, I'm sure you've seen more than this in your day." She had not. That's not right. You're intentionally putting your masseuse in an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure they don't want to see any of their clients naked. I do it and I love it. I'm a guy, and I have to say there are some creepy phone calls, but that's about as bad as it gets. One guy asked exactly what kind of massage I did, which is a common precursor to do you do extras, and I clearly told him about Swedish massage. He said, "That's something my partner and I would be interested in," and asked, "And for the ladies, do you do sensual massage?" I find this euphemism so frustrating. It literally doesn't imply what they want to imply, but it's become recognized as a word for sexy time. I said no. He then said, "Could you?" I said no. Then follows a common awkward situation where we try and both pretend that he hasn't just asked me for some kind of sexual service in return for money, and finish the conversation as you might otherwise. This conversation and the time a rather lonely elderly gay man told me how much he appreciated having a pretty man take care of him were about the weirdest moments. Admittedly, when Mr. Lonely Gay Guy said that to me, I felt a bit gross, but also internally giggled, blushed, and said, "Aw, he thinks I'm pretty." For a fleeting moment, I considered a life as a wealthy boy toy of an aging thespian. My ticket into the high society of homosexual retirees. Feeling slightly jaded and ashamed of my life built on lies and sexual quid pro quo, but driven by the idea of inheriting his immaculate house and fortune. Then I remembered I was a bit far down the road of life for that change of tact, having married a woman, and I decided I would diminish and remain Galadriel in the West. But the weirdness is worth it. Swedish massage is a very fascinating practice based on Western medical understanding of human physiology. You'll learn words like desquamation and lymphatic. There are perks, like ladies paying you to touch their body. There is admittedly a slightly pervy pleasure when you're massaging someone really attractive, but it's seldom and balanced by your professionalism and the amount of slightly tubby men one deals with. And as a guy, I have a disproportionately high level of men, because women therapists won't see guys. It is great though, because men have more muscle, and that's the fun part for me. Getting deep into a thigh or shoulder and working the bits loose. It's truly the best job ever, though I often come home smelling like people. The absolute worst was a guy started touching himself while I was working on him. I have had one other guy proposition me, and one lady that was such a jerk that I ended the session because of what a jerk she was. I've been a therapist 5 years, and these are the only really awful things that have happened. Daily I help people. Daily I make people feel better. I'm sure that's the majority of the job. Of course there's going to be a couple of weird stories given the field, but I'd like to think for the most part they get to do their job the way they want to do it. I'm just gonna say prolapsed uterus and they could have warned me and leave it right there for you to imagine the gaps. I had to suffer this image being put into my head, so now you guys do too. I just graduated in April and I've seen some things. There was a guy that would come to the campus clinic to get a massage from the students. Well, one day his cyst popped. Warm pus flew 3 feet and hit the curtain. Smelled like death. Oh, and then there was the job interview where it was made clear that their distinguished clients would pay for a little extra. How about a big bowl of nope? I'm a massage therapist, doing medical type work. My clients are all super nice, so not many awkward experiences, but I'll share 2. The first one, I came back to change the sheets after one client had gotten dressed and left, and found that she'd had some diarrhea on my table. Luckily, our laundry service treats all of our linens as biohazards anyway, but yuck. And second, I came into the room after washing my hands and letting my client get undressed, and she realized she hadn't been specific enough about how she'd injured her back. So she got up, stark naked, and proceeded to demonstrate the motion she'd been doing when she hurt herself. I wasn't disgusted, bodies don't scare me, but I definitely felt awkward. That's about it. I love my job. I definitely suggest going into massage therapy if you're compassionate and can handle a good amount of physically demanding work. If you're worried about sexual come-ons, stick to medical settings. If you're worried about bodily fluids and/or smells, go the spa route. My brother is a massage therapist for a side income and has tons of horror stories. One of the strangest ones is a man came into their studio, he shared one with others, and specifically asks for a man. Well, he's left in the room with the typical instructions, undress and get under the sheet. And when my brother comes in, the guy is sitting on a couch, cross-legged, naked as the day he was born. Anyway, weirds out my brother, who apologizes and asks him again to get under the sheet and leaves for about 5 minutes. He comes back and begins the massage. Apparently, this guy had a huge penis tattooed on his back and kept hinting for more. The guy even started slightly pulling the sheet off his butt with his hands, and saying things like, "It's just the 2 of us in here. What happens here stays here. I wouldn't say anything." Basically, all of this unnerved my brother a good bit, who was all too happy when the guy's time was up. But, like a champ, he continued to do massages, although they did add that guy to their watch list. I can only imagine all the stories behind the people on that watch list. I worked as a receptionist for a massage service facility. Every masseuse was licensed and the business was legit, but I guess having an all-Asian staff gave creepers the idea that we provide extra services. One day, a rather large white man requested one of our longest massages, 2-hour Swedish massage. I instructed him to disrobe and lie beneath the bedsheets while his massage therapist prepared for the massage. Hand-wrist stretching, hydrating, that kind of thing. Typical procedure. He seemed like a decent guy, so I wasn't expecting any trouble until the masseuse that had just entered the service room stumbled out backwards shouting profanities and slamming the door. Apparently, he was sitting stark naked at the edge of the bed with his wang out, upright, and at full attention. To make it worse, according to the masseuse, when she walked in and gave him a startled look, he gave her the creepiest smile and jumped off the bed as if to approach her. We threatened to call the police and he left, though he had already paid for his service, so too bad for him. I've been doing massage for 10 years, have worked on several military bases, Sedona and Lachlan. You see some strange tattoos, some really interesting scars, some insane back hair, and smell some pretty nasty feet. If you like helping people and aren't into it for the money, especially in this economy, then it's definitely worth it. That's probably your general experience as a massage therapist. Not a whole lot of creepy stuff necessarily, just some kind of gross stuff. I'm a beauty therapist and do massage too. I once had a girl roughly the same age as me in her 20s come in for a body massage as a present from her boyfriend. Whilst doing the massage, I could see the oil looked weird, like a streaky brownish color, and it smelt weird. Well, the client smelt weird. After the massage, we chatted for a bit and she mentioned she'd spent the morning fake tanning herself. I looked at my hands and they looked like I'd just dipped them in chocolate. So brown. I then had to explain to her that it wasn't the best idea to do that as she'd now be one streaky mess. Tan fail. I know some girls have had creepy guys in for massages in the past, but luckily I haven't. Nothing exciting to tell, I'm afraid. Although, one girl had a guy in for a massage, and when she told him the massage was over, he offered her a 21st special extras. She ran off crying. I was still in school and I was giving this guy a massage. Towards the end, he started shifting around a little and acting a bit awkward. I didn't think much of it and just went about finishing up. He'd said it was his first massage. As he exited the room, he got all shifty-eyed and awkward, and seemed a little embarrassed. He didn't want to talk to me. He just paid as quickly as he could and got out of there. I went back to change the sheets and there was a nice little present sitting under the top sheet. A shining little glob. I didn't know what it was, though I had an idea, so I leaned in to sniff it just to be sure. Yep, it's what I thought it was. The worst part? He didn't even tip. He just left something from his tip. That jerk. Why on earth would you smell it? I had a woman that had explosive diarrhea during the treatment. I didn't know what to do, so I just ran out of the room. That's probably the best thing you could have done. Female therapist here, and surprisingly, nothing too creepy or weird so far. I had this one client while still in school who really wanted extra focus work on his toes of all things. After spending my time on his toes, he wanted glute work. He pulled his tight shorty shorts down and bared his hairy bum. Not exactly what I was expecting, being so innocent and new to the field. Needless to say, I pulled his britches right back up. Since then, I've had a few clients make sexual references or try to give me hugs afterwards. No blatant, here's my penis, you know what to do with it. There have been a lot of boners though. Every day, all day. All I see is a clock and boners. Alas, I do love my job. It's easy, but hard work at the same time. Very rewarding. I think it depends on where you work, what area of town, and who you're employed by. But I personally love what I do. Yeah, at the end of the day, if this is the field you're looking to get into, just be careful where you work and who you work with more than anything else, assuming you're trying to avoid these situations. A client came in unable to fully stand upright due to low back pain. I told her that I would likely need to work in the hip area, so she should probably remove her underwear. She then said, "Oh, well, I had an accident earlier today and I threw away my panties so I would be more comfortable leaving my pants on." I did the massage anyway, although my coworkers were telling me to refuse to do it. But I felt like if you've already pooped your pants that day, you'd probably feel even worse if someone refused to touch you because of it. However, at the time, I was assuming that she'd actually cleaned herself post-liquid poop. I massaged her back and did compressions on her glutes and hamstrings with her pants on, all while the smell of excrement wafted in my face. Then I noticed at the end of the massage that she had brown stains along the cuff of her pants. She gave me a nice tip, but I had to thoroughly bleach the entire room and sanitize everything after she left. But nothing can sanitize my brain. Physical therapist here, but we do massages a lot. Here's a few quick ones. A girl on her period without a tampon or pad who stunk like heck from body odor messed up the towel we put out for the patients. Next, a woman in her late 40s. I sent her into the room and said that I would follow after taking a short break to get something to drink. Upon entering the room, I found her completely naked doing the sexy look. I turned around and left. In a clinic for chronic pain therapy, a woman accused me of sexual abuse because I didn't want to give her a happy ending. Luckily, she confessed to the psychologist that she made it up. A patient with a polytrauma and a fixature extern fled naked out of the 3rd floor. We didn't know how to manage this, or even why he was running. And many more stories I just can't remember right now or would take too long to explain. But even those bad stories can't take down the positive effects of the job. Grateful people everywhere. My sister is a massage therapist, and one day while working at a very nice upscale spa, she noticed that the guy she was working on would not stay still. He kept wriggling around on the table and she kept having to ask him if he was okay and comfortable. He said he was fine and she would continue, only to have it go on. Finally, the massage is over and she leaves the room to let him get dressed. She waits a few minutes, then knocks on the door to see if he wants water or if he's ready to go pay. He tells her he's done and to come on in, and she walks into him touching himself on her massage table. Apparently, he'd been grinding on the table / trying to get some friction / touch himself, or who knows, while she was working on him. She had taken a break from massage for a while, but she's now back working at the same place, and she's already had people ask her for a happy ending. Needless to say, she's not really crazy about the profession anymore. That's just it. I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, this kind of thing is gonna happen because there are creeps. If it's not something you can handle, then I don't blame you. Massage therapist here. There are some pretty unfortunate clients. Ones that smell, ones that are really fat, ones that are really skinny. Massaging bone is harder than massaging fat. Awkward ones, really hairy ones, horny ones who leave stains on the sheets. But my most off-putting types of clients are the ones, usually older, with lots of dead skin, that once you start to massage them and do the motions with your hands, their skin, combined with the oil or cream, makes for a disgusting mixture that sticks to your hands and onto their skin. And you're just smearing it everywhere, and trying to fling it aside so you can get through the rest of the hour. That's the worst for me. This wasn't even something I had considered until this point, but ugh. Male massage therapist here. Back when I was in school, I was doing a clinic at the school. It was a pretty chill scene. A lot of us developed regulars and got into a routine. My nights were Tuesday nights, and one day I came in and noticed I had a whole list of my regulars in, including this older man that had been coming to the school for years and getting massages. Every week since starting, he would request me. Now, the school says they can't always get you the massage therapist you want, but they'll try. Every week, like clockwork, he would be my last client. At first, he was nice and social. Then, over the weeks, his questions got extremely personal, and despite my trying to avoid personal questions, he would keep asking. As well, over time, every time I would get him to turn over, he would be packing a major rager. This was usually the point where questions got more personal. One night, I finally had enough, as he began asking if I would ever give a special ending for a large tip. I calmly declined and approached one of my instructors the next day. She just nodded her head and offered to change my night I worked. Kinda feel like it needs to be a little more addressed than that, but hey, at least she got you out of there. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.